order this meeting of the Santa Barbara School Board of Education for Tuesday, September 22nd, 2009. We are going to open with the Pledge of Allegiance, so please rise. We do have Spanish translation available.
I'd like to comment. It was fantastic hearing those young voices on that Pledge of Allegiance. My goodness, I think you guys all led it better than we did. Thank you.
Sí, muy buenas noches y bienvenidos de parte de la Junta Directiva del Distrito Escolar de Santa Bárbara. Si hay alguien que necesite la ayuda de un intérprete, por favor levante la mano para darle un audífono. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you. We also have headsets available for the hearing impaired. Please just notify somebody at one of the side tables here if you need one. Introductions, proclamations, presentations, or recognitions.
Yes, we do. Well, I'm thrilled. We have some outstanding students with us tonight. And I see teachers, I see administrators, I see families. This is great. The California Standards Test is administered annually in the spring. All grades are tested in English language arts and math. Students in grades 5, 8, and 10 are also tested in science, and students in grades 8 and 10 are tested in history. So you have some tests to come. Tonight, we have many of the district's top scoring students who were either the highest scoring student district-wide at each grade level, the student who has had the highest score district-wide, or who is the highest scoring student at each of the schools. And in some cases, it was the same student. Let me tell you their names and the school they attended at the time they took the test this last year. And I will start with last year's second graders, now in third grade. From McKinley School, we have Pablo Sella. Pablo, could you come forward? Congratulations, Pablo. We'd like you to stand right here and wait for the other students to get their awards as well. Also, from second grade last year, now in third grade, Roosevelt School, Thomas Roth. And from Washington School, Diego Perez. Last year's third graders, now in fourth grade. From Homeschool Santa Barbara, Elena Murphy. I guess Elena isn't here tonight. From Adams School, Simon Parker. It was Simon's eyes who lit up when I said, and you get to take more tests in science and history, social science later. And Harding School, Anthony Luna Velez. Well, last year's fourth graders, now in fifth grade, from Cleveland School, Juan Zarate. And from Monroe School, Rafael Saavedra. And from Santa Barbara Community Academy, Madeline Lazarovitz. And last year's fifth graders, now in sixth grade, from Franklin School, Irving Soto. And from Washington School, Nicholas Katzer. And last year's top sixth grader, now in seventh grade, from Open Alternative School, now at Goleta Valley Junior High, Andrew Yang. Last year's seventh graders, now in eighth grade, from Santa Barbara Junior High, Alida Siegel. So, Alida, I saw the look on your face. Alida, right? And La Cumbre Junior High, Dolan Ingraham. And last year's 8th graders, now in 9th grade, from La Cumbre Junior High, now at Dos Pueblos, Helen Yang. Goleta Valley Junior High, now at Dos Pueblos, Eugene Cho. And La Colina Junior High, now at DP, Brenna Hensley. Last year's top 9th grader, now in 10th grade, from Dos Pueblos High School, V. Luan Huyn. Did I say that right?
Pretty accurate.
Pretty accurate. If you'd like to correct me. And last year's 10th grader, now in 11th grade, from Dos Pueblos High School, Richard Cheng. And finally, 2 11th graders, now seniors, from San Marcos High School, John Vance. And from Santa Barbara High School, Rebecca Nielsen Robbins. Of course, we know that behind these successful students are teachers, parents, and family members who support their goals and encourage them to do their best. Parents, would you please stand so the students and I can recognize you? Students. Students, congratulations to all of you. Congratulations on doing your job and challenging yourselves to do the best job possible. Thanks so much.
Thank you, students, for the wonderful work that you do every day at school, and then for showing it to us on your student achievement tests. We really appreciate that. You will be on television this Saturday at 5 o'clock if you would like to see yourselves on Channel 18. So keep that on, put that on your DVR if you're not there live. Parents, thank you so much. It is all about making them go to bed early and eat their vegetables. And parents, we all owe a deep, deep debt of gratitude to the teachers and to the principals. So many of you are here tonight. Thank you for the work that you do. You make this possible. Mr. Herron.
Yes, I know that behind all of that, there's some grandparents here. Let's say thank you to the grandparents. Can they stand up?
There we go. Thank you all.
Good, thanks, students. Okay, it's homework time.
Class dismissed. Yeah.
There's always homework in life, right? Thanks. Well, while the students are heading out to get their homework done, I would like Tim Schwartz to come up. And board, let me tell you about Tim. I want to introduce someone to you who was appointed the executive director of the Santa Barbara Education Foundation in April 2009, Tim Schwartz. The executive director is responsible for the management of the foundation's fundraising efforts and programmatic initiatives as they reflect the needs of our schools and our students. Tim has 20 years of nonprofit management and fundraising experience, including 10 years as the assistant dean at UCSB and founder of the university's Center for Entrepreneurship. Tim Schwartz.
Thank you. It's certainly an honor to be part of a 35-year tradition that the foundation is, now shares in serving the students and district. And we're at a unique opportunity right now with several factors that have converged over the last 6 to 9 months, and I think they'll continue to converge over the next 6 to 12 months. But it allows the Education Foundation to work with partners in the community to creatively, pragmatically look at and develop initiatives that will have the most meaning and impact on our most valuable asset, which is the education of our students. So I look forward to talking with each of you. You feel free to call me if I don't call you to help us define what these initiatives ought to look like. And I wanted to express some gratitude to Susan Deacon and Brian, who are regular attendees at our board meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Schwartz, I feel like we have an opposite situation here where we have to thank your children for allowing you to be present tonight. But thank you. It's great to have you here at a board meeting, and exciting to see the direction that the Ed Foundation is taking.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Mrs. Deacon.
Oh, and I would just like to add, as the board liaison to the Santa Barbara Education Foundation, I can attest to Tim's energy and enthusiasm, and I think we're going to see some really great initiatives coming out of the board that under
Thanks,
his.
Susan.
Thank you. With that, we will move on to the superintendent's report.
Good, thank you. Well, I do have a fairly brief report on what's happening in the district, not that a lot of things aren't happening. Just finishing up on back-to-school nights, Santa Barbara Junior High and Peabody Charter will hold back-to-school nights on Thursday, and all the other schools have held their parent nights. I was at a number of them. I saw some board members at some of them, and I was quite impressed. Board members, I know you were as well. There was a lot of enthusiasm. I love hearing from teachers about the enthusiasm about what students are going to learn in that class. And parents comment on that regularly. We continue to focus on sharing information with the school community about the flu season and what we can do to stay healthy. There are flyers on the back table on the H1N1. That continues to be a concern, and we continue to be planning for it so that we're ready in the event that we have more cases here. The board brief. My office regularly issues a report to the board called the Board Brief. It's a collection of reports and news items on school and district matters. A copy of the September 11 board brief is on display in the reception area. The September 11 board brief included a couple of things that I would like to highlight. First, a proposal to fund additional preschool programs that both Robin Sawaski and I, Robin Sawaski is our Associate Superintendent for Education. We've been talking to various South Coast foundations over the past year about preschools. The timing on soliciting additional funds, given the current economy, is obviously poor right now, so I don't know whether we'll be able to move ahead on such a proposal. But we did want to get our written proposal out so that we at least had it published and didn't have to update it every time we went and talked to another organization. And the second is that the board also has an update on elementary school gardens from Dave Hatyunk, our Director of Facilities. And we will be proceeding with elementary gardens, as you saw in that memo. And this ends tonight's superintendent's report.
Mr. Herron.
Do you have any update on the Monroe situation that's been in the paper the last couple of days?
Well, I've been in contact with the police department on a regular basis about it. We were pleased that the situation unfolded over a Saturday. That was planned on their part. We were pleased that that the operation is shut down. I mean, it was just far too close to one of our schools, and they've been a big help to us. But you know, it was one of those situations where they went in to serve warrants with some idea, but not a complete idea about what they were going to find. And boy, they found a lot more than any of us would have hoped for.
Thank you. With that, we will move on to item C2, announcement of closed session action. We do have 2 items to report out. First was on item B1, conference with legal counsel, existing litigation. This is case number N 2009-080606. It was moved by Noel and seconded by Herron to approve the settlement, which requires the district to provide compensatory special educational services to the student and to pay the student's attorney's fees. The fiscal impact on the district will be $55,100. It was also, the motion also delegated to the superintendent the authority to sign the service contracts as provided for in the settlement agreement. That passed 4-0 with Cordero absent. On item B2, this was conference with legal counsel, existing litigation, case number 711-985-1196. It was moved by Deacon and seconded by Herron to approve the final settlement, which requires the district to provide compensatory special educational services to the student and to pay the student's attorney's fees. The fiscal impact on the district will be $100,000, and that passed 4-0 with Cordero absent. Item C3, public comments.
We have none.
All right. Item C4, acceptance of donations.
Move to accept with appreciation?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. That passes unanimously. And then moving on to the consent agenda. Are there any items that board members would like to pull from the consent agenda? Mrs. Deacon.
D2.
13 and 14.
B2, 13, and 14. Any others?
D16.
D16. Is there a motion to approve the remainder?
I move to approve the remainder of the consent agenda items.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That passes unanimously, and we will return to the pulled consent items at the end of the agenda. We now move on to item E1. On the action agenda, approval of Measure I, parcel tax site plans for math, science, and technology for Adams Elementary School, Franklin Elementary School, Harding Elementary School, Home School of Santa Barbara, McKinley, Monroe, Roosevelt, Washington Elementary Schools, and the Santa Barbara Community Academy.
Well, we've moved rather quickly to get the programs and materials approved by our voters in the parcel tax initiatives in place. The board has approved a classroom music program. These are additional math, science, technology plans, and Robin Swaski, our associate superintendent, will present this.
Okay, I know you've had time to review the plans, and I just want to comment that the way in which the funding was allotted was that we took the total amount of the parcel tax when we got that from the county auditor and we shared that with the oversight committee at this last meeting a little over a week ago. And when we had the total amount of funding, then we divided that by the total amount of ADA from P2 this last spring. That includes the charters. And then we took what the dollar amount per child would be. And then we found out what the charters, got. We gave them their allotment. They are still going to return, bring back their site plans. Those were not included in here, as two of our other schools also didn't have it completed at the time. They will bring back a plan first to the oversight committee that will review and recommend for the board to formally approve the plans. That one will include music in it. Then we hired our music teachers, and off the top of that, as Dr. Sarvis said, then this amount was left over per school and again divided out per the ADA, the P2 last spring. So those were the amounts. That's how it came about. The principals were asked to create a site plan with their team at the school and develop a plan thinking long range, because many of them had technology needs in this first go-round, and making sure that it was supplemental, not supplanting. So we took a lot of time, and we shared with the Oversight Committee the base data, and I know you've seen some of that. We're now in the middle of collecting data to show what it is this year, now that we have our teachers in place, particularly at the secondary level. And as our classroom music program is finalizing with the schedule, we can then give you the base data so we can show that it definitely is a supplemental program, and more importantly, even to the taxpayers, that it's supplemental. So these plans, although they don't look the same, are very similar in nature as far as how they are supporting technology, math, and science, some a little bit more, depending on what the school needs. As I noted in here, I talked to Brian Tangway in purchasing, and we will be being more consistent with the purchase of some of the items, because you notice when you read through, what first hit me was, computers cost different amounts, the overheads and the document cameras, there were different amounts in there, and that was based on where the principals did their own research to put the plan together. Brian's then going to help them, and where appropriate, we'll make larger purchases in bulk if we can get a discount by doing that, and meet their needs that way. So we're asking for approval so that we can get these purchases in place and move forward.
Board members? Mr. Herring?
Number one, I think they're fantastic. Obviously, I love the emphasis on technology. Number two, I really love it because it looks like there's more money allocated to this part than was originally planned. So I think we got even more, which I really love. The only possible question I had was, I'm sorry to see that Monroe had to spend their money on Read 180 equipment, because I understand the special reasons for that, but they're the only ones that use their money for Read 180. I guess all the other schools have what they need for Read 180.
Many of the schools had purchased computers, in some cases, parent funds, but for the most part, the discretionary site, the block grants that came around, I think it was almost 2 years ago, many of the sites have used that at the time. And so, yes, Monroe is using it. They will be using that technology, obviously, for other things as well. I did want to comment on it's more than what you expected. That's because we're phasing in our music program. We hired 4 music teachers this year to supplement the 2.5 we had in place. It really needs 8.5 to do the complete kindergarten through 6th grade. So we will be coming back next year with the addition of 2 more music teachers, which will lower the amount for math, science, and technology.
Mrs. Deacon?
Thank you for addressing my question about the computers. In addition to the cost savings, I expect tech support, maintenance, all those things make a lot more sense if we have uniform kinds of computers. I noticed one school is leasing them and the others are buying them. Is there a cost difference there, or is that because the PTO is going to make up the difference later?
Yes, that was something that Washington School wanted to do. Now this is also something that Eric will be looking at. And I believe Eric did work with Mr. Barnett at one point on the leasing option, but now that it's come back to light, we'll be looking at that, and we may have to adjust it if that doesn't pass through all of what it takes to get through that and the purchasing. But that's their plan. That's what they wanted to go through, the oversights, and essentially you are approving the funding of it, the amount of money.
Any other questions on it? Dr. Noel?
Yeah, I'm a little puzzled by some of these. The Harding School proposal is explicitly not about math or technology or anything that the parcel tax was about, but to support the IB program, which I support also, but I don't quite, I see their logic. They're saying, well, we spent a lot of money on mathematics things in the past. It just still doesn't make sense in terms of the criteria for the program. Essentially saying we're going to now give you money to cover to use for other purposes for something that because you bought the math stuff earlier. Okay, that's one. Let me go on, because no, it's not the only one. Then I look at the Santa Barbara Community Academy. And we're talking about buying new hardware, Microsoft Office to be installed on 20 computers to be used for student classroom presentations using Excel and PowerPoint. I don't see that fits the criteria for the expenditure of the parcel tax money either. And then Washington Elementary, they want to replace aging computer labs. That's normal wear and tear. You don't take money that's dedicated to improving instruction in science and math and replace aging computers. You're supposed to do that out of your normal funds. If you don't have them, I realize you have a problem, but that's not the framework that we did when we passed the parcel tax.
Yeah, let's have Ms. Sawatsky.
Okay,
address that.
I'll try to kind of combine all the answers, although they are different. The overarching piece that is the same is that all of these address technology. And that is a big piece of the parcel tax. Particular to Harding, that technology will support IB, but the IB program has a lot of science involved in that. It's really, doing the research and supporting that program. As Dr. Kingston stated in hers or alluded to, the district has spent a lot of instructional materials money on math, and as a lot of the programs or the plans described, our new math adoption has a lot of resources for parents, students, and staff that are online and available through the internet and through technology. So it really enhances the math program simply by having more up-to-date computers and software on the site. So that kind of that addresses that, and then the Washington, as far as being, I want to talk about the supplemental versus supplant, because you brought up a point that we talked about at length in the Oversight Committee. I don't know about at length, but we had a discussion about it. Because we have never in the elementary district had money set aside, it's never been a line item to buy technology. It's not something that we're supplanting with that had been in place before. They've never had that. And so they've had to use like the site block grant that came that time, the discretionary block grant that I talked about. They've had to have parent groups raise it, other means, grants to get the technology. It truly is supplemental. And on the other side of that too is the fact that every 2 or 3 years or less, equipment is very dramatically different. And so the materials, the computers they're getting now are significantly different than what they had before. They're really upgrading their technology and the access the students have. And I believe that meets, and the Oversight Committee believes that meets the spirit of and the language of the ballot measure. Now, we're certainly open to what the board feels is appropriate as well, but that's the gist of the conversation we had with the Oversight Committee.
Mr. Herron.
Yeah, Dr. Noel, I believe if you read the measures, technology is a separate topic from math and science. It was money for technology. It wasn't for math and science technology education. It was for math, science, and technology. So it was a separate category. It wasn't tied to math and science.
Well, my understanding has always been that it was from technology education and not simply to replace hardware or to buy new hardware.
Well,
I haven't reviewed that debate we had at the time, but it was about things we were not teaching because of budget constraints, and that it was a way to guarantee that we offered those components in our educational program. You notice I'm not complaining about the ones where they say we want to buy this hardware because we have a math program that we can't run without it. I'm not quarreling about that. But you move away from that direct connection to education, to technology education, science education, mathematics education, when you say, well, we spent the money on that 3 years ago, now we want to use this money for something else. So the things that we wish we had spent that money on, that doesn't cut. That's too big of a stretch.
May I address this as well?
sure, Dr. Sarvis.
That clearly is about technology. We purposely ran this by the I-2008 Parcel Tax Committee, the Oversight Committee, to ensure that it did in fact meet the language of the ballot measure. They've looked at these and given us that assurance, and we think we're completely consistent with the ballot language. You may have a preference about it being spent elsewhere, but we think we're perfectly healthy in this in regard.
And I have to say that I always, there may be some slight variation in the language between the measure H and the measure I in terms of technology, but for the elementary district, I always understood it to be purchasing technology to give kids access to up-to-date curriculum, not necessarily technology training, but using technology in the classroom, which I think in all of these cases whether it's math, science, reading, international baccalaureate, it's connected to that. Mrs. Cordero?
Well, first of all, I just want to say I found these proposals really inspiring, because I kept thinking, if I were a parent and I was seeing the things that these measures were helping to do in the classroom, I would have been very happy to have supported those measures. I think these are great uses of the money. I think they're perfectly consistent with the measure, and I think they really are bringing the students more opportunities to have really current curriculum, access to really current curriculum. And so I thought that was really useful. I'm glad that you mentioned, because that was one of my concerns, was the fact that some of the numbers varied so dramatically. I know you had said in your cover letter, it talked a little bit about trying to get some common pricing, but I was wondering if it is a matter of different sites needing different, what do I want to say? Yeah, different functions on their various computers. But even the things like the document cameras seem to vary dramatically. So, I think I certainly support the idea that there would be some room for different schools having different functions and not necessarily having to have exactly the same thing if it doesn't fit the needs of that particular school. But I was wondering if, if there is a sort of more unified pricing, if that would in fact maybe lead to better, sort of a more efficient pricing as well, because we would be able to sort of do it all at once.
That's our goal, to do that. And that's, why it says not to exceed, because we won't use more than that, but in some cases, I think maybe someone might be able to get 2 document cameras, that kind of thing. And again, I could have put a template together and had them kind of punch in some numbers. I thought about doing something like that, although the turnaround time was very quick. We didn't get the information on the budget. And the county auditor had to give information to Meg Jete and her department, and then she had to create the budgets, and she was doing something else I'm sure, trying to close the books. So we had a quick turnaround, and we wanted the schools to be able to get this in place. I thought it was interesting, too, to see kind of the flavor of how the schools wrote them. It was interesting on the first go-around. Maybe in subsequent years we can have it more be kind of straightforward in a template where they just punch in numbers and items. But I intentionally thought about that, just having them design it how they wanted to design it, so they could kind of put their story out there about what they wanted.
Mrs. Deacon?
I also appreciated the narratives provided by each school, because it gives us real insight into the personality of the school and the thinking that went behind their proposals. I'd also just like you to pass along to the Measure I committee our thanks for the hard work they're doing, because I know they take this job very seriously, and I appreciate what they've done.
All right, and really we do, Mrs. Cordero, you brought up that point, but just to really strike at it again, we owe the voters of Santa Barbara a real debt of gratitude for this. This is making a big difference for the kids. It really is, if these go through. So this is on for action, and I need a motion.
I
would, Madam President, I would.
Yes, Dr. Noel.
I would ask to vote on each one separately, so I could vote no on the ones I want to vote no on. Would that be permissible to you?
Yes.
Thank you.
So what I'm going to do to be time efficient is I'm going to ask that somebody so move as I just run through the list. Is there a motion to approve the Measure I parcel tax site plan for Adams Elementary School?
So move.
Wait a minute, Adam, so you're doing it alphabetically, huh?
I'm doing it in order on the list from
Oh, I'm sorry.
from the,
I beg your pardon.
okay, from Adams Elementary School.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
That passed unanimously. Is there a motion to approve the Measure I parcel tax for site plan for Math, Science, and Tech for Franklin?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that passes unanimously. Is there a measure to approve the Measure I parcel tax site plan for Math Science and Tech for Harding Elementary School?
So move.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oh, wait a minute. That was
Harding, yeah, that's
No,
Harding.
No. Sorry.
All right. That carries 4-1. Is there a measure to approve the measure, is there a motion to approve the Measure I parcel tax site plan for Math Science and Tech for Homeschool Santa Barbara?
So move.
This is which,
Deacon
Second.
seconded that one. This is for Homeschool Santa Barbara. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Dr. Noel, are you an
no,
aye on that
I'm
one?
abstaining on that one.
And one, okay, that carries 4-0 with one abstention. Is there a motion to approve the Measure I parcel tax site plan for Math Science and Tech for McKinley School?
So move.
I'll second, but I have a question
Okay.
or comment.
Mhm.
I notice we're paying insurance or a protection plan for a couple $1,000s. And I don't know if that's normal or, I mean, that's $2,000 that could be used for document readers or projectors. I don't know if we normally buy those kinds of plans, but I'd like it looked into at least.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That passes unanimously. Is there a motion to approve the Measure I parcel tax site plan for Math Science and Tech for Monroe School?
So move.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes unanimously.
No, I didn't. I'm voting no on it.
Okay, that carries 4-1 with Dr. Noel voting no. Is there a measure to approve, is there a motion to approve the Measure I parcel tax site plan for Math Science and Tech for Roosevelt School?
So move.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
That carries 4-1 with Dr. Noel opposing. Is there a motion to approve the Measure I parcel tax site plan for Washington Elementary School?
So move.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
That carries 4-1. And then is there a motion to approve the Measure I parcel tax site plan for Math Science and Tech for Santa Barbara Community Academy?
So move.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Count me an aye on that.
Okay, that one carried unanimously then. All right, thank you all. And we will move on to item E2, which is the approval and adoption of revised board focus goals for 2009-10.
You have the language in front of you that's being brought back one final time for your approval. There have been no changes in the wording since our last meeting. I'm recommending that you approve the language presented tonight for board focus goals for 2009-10.
Any comments, board members? Mr. Herron?
Yeah. I'm the one that asked that this be brought back because I thought I had a different understanding of what he'd done. So I went back and watched the DVD, and what I left was these words from one of our members: meet the goal or eliminate the program. Have had the goal for decades, haven't met the goal. That we need some heavy-handed tactics. I left with those thoughts in my mind, but the reality is the language that's on here is what we ultimately decided on in the session. So I just left with faulty memory, and I can't blame it on the night because we did this one in the morning.
All right, any other comments?
I have a question
Yes, Dr. Noel?
on the very last point. Discuss underrepresentation of Latino students in the district GATE program and investigate alternative models. I don't understand what investigate alternative models means.
That was based on your suggestion, Dr. Noel, when you were saying that there are other schools in the state that have GATE programs that successfully include underrepresented students, or in this case, Latino students. And in fact, you were talking about Sigismund High School as one example. And that's what we meant by investigate alternative models, is look at what other,
So one of the alternatives is not to abandon it.
no.
Okay, that makes a big difference to me. Could we perhaps put in there to make that clear, the district GATE program investigate alternative GATE models?
All right, add the word GATE in. Yes, Mrs. Cordero?
I was the one, I think,
Yes,
Mr. Herron,
I didn't.
who said that we should make improvements or we should eliminate the program. Because it has been truly decades that we've been saying we are going to do this, and we haven't made significant progress. And so if this isn't working, we should be doing something else. So I'm certainly not advocating that we have to eliminate the program, but my recollection, and I think it's confirmed by Mr. Herron, was that at that meeting, the possible elimination was one of the alternatives.
Well, I think that we would have to do a lot more investigation if we were going to include that in a board focus goal, because I don't know that, given our our LEA gate plan and state ed code, I don't know if you can stop identifying gate kids altogether. If you see what I mean, in terms of a total elimination of a program. I think you can really revamp it, but I don't know that you can completely eliminate it.
Well, I guess I would prefer, I'm, as I said, I'm not advocating that we eliminate it. I just don't want to say, I don't want to tie our hands with what we can do in order to make a difference. So rather than saying alternative, I don't want to say, let me just say this directly. I would prefer not to say alternative gate models, because I think there are other programs that might serve the same purpose as gate that we, in our investigation, could conceivably find to be more effective. And I don't want to preclude us from moving to something else if that seemed to be more workable. If another gate model is the best, then that would be fine, but I don't want to say it can only be another gate model if something else is actually better.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Noel?
Perhaps we could just end the sentence with, discuss underrepresentation of Latino students in the district gate program.
I think that would be broad enough. It's fine with me. I don't know if other board
It
members.
precludes nothing and includes nothing.
Mr. Herron?
What was that?
So the last focus goal would be discuss underrepresentation of Latino students in the district gate program.
You know, I guess what I left that meeting with was, you know, under student achievement number 1, we will significantly increase participation. And that's the one that's been there for decades. And now you say we're going to discuss it. It just gives me no faith whatsoever that anything changes. And so I guess that's what I was thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Mrs. Cordero?
Technically, we're discussing it now. Is that what we mean? I mean, I don't want that to be our goal.
No.
That we just sit around and talk about it. The goal has to be to investigate ways of improving it and to actually put those into action. For me, the goal should be to actually have an improved outcome. Thought about adding all schools will improve the performance of Latino and EL students subgroups. Back in where Mr. Herron thought we had maybe left out a focus goal. But at the very least, I think we should keep this about really in doing some investigation, trying to find models or practices, approaches, whatever we want to call it, that produce an improved outcome.
How about the language changing, instead of discuss, make it investigate underrepresentation of Latino students in the district gate program to improve, what would be good language for that? Dr. Noel?
Yes, this is pretty hard to put into a single sentence, because there are a lot of reasons why Latino students are underrepresented in those programs. And there are examples of schools that prepare Latino students to participate in those kinds of programs and in other higher level programs very effectively and with great success. So that this is an opening for a broad investigation of what it is that we are not doing, that we might be doing for the 6th graders, for the 7th graders, for the 8th graders, so that when they arrive at 9th grade, they're competitive. Or when they arrive in 10th grade, they're competitive. To me, either you leave this really simple and a bit empty, I would agree with you, Mr. Herron. Or, if you want to be serious about it, then this is a big program. This is a large agenda in and of itself. It's nothing less than an examination of why our disadvantaged and Latino students are not succeeding from grade 3 through grade 9 and 10.
Yes, Mrs. Cordero?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, that should consume 90% of our time, because those,
I concur.
those are the overwhelming majority of our students. If they're not succeeding, we should be spending the majority of our time talking about that. So the fact that it's a big issue is not a deterrent at all. If it's that big, we need to be spending that much time dealing with it. I was going to recommend language based on what you had started to recommend, Ms. Parker. Investigate underrepresentation of Latino students in the district GATE program to increase Latino participation.
Mrs. Deacon?
Well, I'm also in the camp that I think I don't want to eliminate this investigate piece, or at least some component of that, because I think, again, just discussing it doesn't move us forward, and I think we all agree we want to move it forward, even if it's big and consuming, because I think it's something we really want to do. In terms of the wording, I don't know if I have any better wording than what I've heard so far. I like the idea of using investigate as a strong action verb, just to let us know that that's what we intend to do. I'm not opposed to investigating alternative models either, to be honest. We know that some schools have high-achieving students that aren't necessarily GATE identified in some of those classes, and I think we may want to look towards policies that facilitate moving students into classes where they're really challenged, and they've shown that they're able to produce under those circumstances. So these are my general feelings. I don't have any specific better language, though.
Dr. Noel, and then Mr. Herron.
Well, I like the investigate also, but I would want to investigate the reasons for consistent low levels of performance, relatively low levels of performance, or investigate the persistence of the achievement gap throughout the grades, because you close the achievement gap and you solve this problem.
I in some ways, yes, and in some ways, no. I also think that there is just a real issue with identification in our GATE program, and then how those students are served and who gets served and who doesn't get served. So I feel like the achievement gap is there constantly, but I'm not sure that it will help us move forward strictly on this issue if we include that in as such a broad topic in the board focus goals. Mrs. Deacon.
And under student achievement, I think we really have identified the things that we want to do to address the achievement gap. I mean, I think if we address these student achievement goals, we're really tackling that piece. So I think we're specifically talking about representation in GATE classes in the last bullet point.
Mr. Herron?
Yeah, is there a reason the last bullet point talks about underrepresentation in GATE programs when the first student achievement includes GATE, AP, honors, IB, academies, and dual enrollment? Don't we have the same underrepresentation in all of those?
Yes, and we could broaden it to include all those sections at
Yes,
least.
I didn't understand why
Yeah.
GATE
Okay.
was.
I think
Yeah.
you're right. I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's absolutely what we should do.
Then maybe we should delete this altogether. It's redundant.
Well, it's not redundant in the sense that we have a student achievement and an expectation that each school will significantly increase participation. However, without a core investigation into what our practices are systemically, I don't think we will see, it will be almost random if it happens. Mr. Herron?
Yeah, I think the first bullet point says our goal. This bottom bullet points say, what are we gonna do about it? How are we gonna achieve these goals? And, we need to investigate and we need to do something.
So the proposed language as it stands, I'm just going to read that off to you, is, the last bullet point is investigate underrepresentation of Latino students in the district. I would say in district, in advanced courses, just in order to mimic the language, in advanced courses. And then we can put, again, the same parentheses that includes GATE, Advanced Placement, Honors, International Baccalaureate, Academies, and dual enrollment in order to increase Latino participation. Any other suggested language on that?
I'd like you to repeat that.
Okay. The last bullet point for, in order to support these goals in 2009, 2010, the board will investigate underrepresentation of Latino students in district advanced courses, ergo GATE, Advanced Placement, Honors, International Baccalaureate, Academies, and dual enrollment in order to increase Latino participation.
That's the last bullet point.
That's the last bullet point.
So okay. Do I understand correctly then, investigate alternative models is not included?
Correct.
Okay.
All right, do we have any public comment on E2?
Kate Smith.
President Parker, members of the Santa Barbara Board of Education, this discussion of the school board focus goals was disconcerting at best, horrifying at worst. For the first time, you've used the word investigate. What has your role been for the last 10 years? We know your action has been to do nothing. How about investigating our allegations of corruption? We just spent $60,000 on the FICMAT, which was not meant to be an investigation because they specifically were not allowed to discuss complaints. They were just supposed to draw up an operational model. Ed Herron's words, we need to investigate and do something. I'm sorry. We have had death and destruction in our district for decades, and you're still right at the very beginning, where Annette Cordero was when you were discussing the gang task force outreach workers. She said, well, we have to do something. And so you approved programs, policies, and practices that have been illegal, unethical, and uncivil. I'm going to read from the foreword of Battling Corruption in America's Public Schools by Lydia Siegel and James Jacobs. On the pathology of the urban school bureaucracy, the foreword says, battling school corruption in America's public schools throws down the gauntlet to proponents of school reform. If the problem of school reform were not complicated and untractable enough, Professor Siegel has illuminated protracted systemic corruption rooted deep in the structure, organization, and operation of the nation's largest school system. Even worse, she shows how this systemic corruption distorts the school system's priorities, putting children's education last. And the situation is exacerbated by certain centrally mandated anti-corruption controls that do not prevent and perhaps generate corruption while blocking initiative, creativity, and effective decision-making at the individual schools. I have said this before. I will say it again. This school district has lost sight of the educational mission.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith.
All right, board members. Dr. Noel?
Yeah, I just thought of something that I wanted to bring up. And I can't quite put my finger on it when I heard it, but it was in the context of of GATE programs discussions. And I've heard it said that we're one of the few districts that offers GATE at the high school level. I do, as you know, I spend a lot of time in state databases, and I was just browsing around in the new API growth database, something like well over 1,000 high schools. And I've just hit on in the demographic fields, percent gate enrollment. So I pulled that out and I looked at it. And if you take 5% enrollment or more, there are 775 high schools in the state of California that have gate programs with 5% or more. Now, I don't know whether I'm reading something incorrectly or something that is not really relevant to the discussion, but.
Yeah, I want to be a little careful that we stay on the board focus goals and actually not start a
But this is
conversation.
about gate.
Gate.
And-
But we
and
don't
I-
want to
and I-
discuss
and I just-
gate.
And it was in that
Yeah,
context that
yeah.
this fact was brought up, and I wanted to put some other facts out there and have them address, if possible here, maybe not, maybe somewhere else.
May I suggest, we do want to bring a discussion of that very issue back to the board, and I think we can clarify that very point, but let's agendize it so that we
Yeah.
can do that.
Thank
That's
you.
good.
Okay, that'd be
Thank
fine.
you.
All right, Mrs. Cordero.
I would like to move to approve the board focus goals for 2009, 2010 as amended.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
That passes unanimously. We are now moving on to item E3, the report of annual teacher assignments and approval of resolutions 0910-11 and 0910-12.
And Dr. Robertson will make the report on annual teacher assignments.
Thank you. Good evening. Each year, Education Code 44258.9 requires that a report be made to the Board of Education to verify the legality that each of our teachers and their assignments has to be brought forward as an action item. The study of teaching assignments for the 2009-2010 school year has been completed by Ann Peak, and all teachers are authorized to teach in their assignments. However, the secondary schools are rather complex in terms of some of their classes and subject matter that teachers can teach based on their background. You look at their transcripts quite extensively to look at certain qualifications. You have a copy of the various codes and what each of them represent underneath, that all teachers teaching under the Ed Code meet the criteria and have some kind of experience or expertise in the subject area that they are teaching that allows them to continue teaching in those areas. To go over just briefly what those Ed Codes are, Ed Code 44263 authorizes the holder of any teaching credential with his or her consent to teach any departmentalized class in which he or she has 18 units or 9 upper division units in the subject being taught. This particular Ed Code requires a resolution. Ed Code 44256B authorizes the holder of an elementary credential to teach with the consent departmentalized classes in which he or she has 12 units or 6 upper division units in the subject. This also requires a board resolution. The other Ed Codes, 44258.1 authorizes elementary type credential holder to teach in middle school, requires teaching 2 or more subjects for 2 or more periods per day in the same group of students, and may teach any of those subjects to a separate group of students at the same grade level. This is where it gets really complex. So it goes into all these different things. So you have a number of names under there showing you that these people qualify under this Ed Code to be teaching the subject matter that they're at. Ed Code 44258.2 authorizes the holder of a secondary type credential to be assigned to teach with his or her consent classes in a middle school in which he or she has 12 units or 6 upper division units in the subject matter. Again, more individuals identified. Ed Code 44258.3 authorizes the holder of a non-emergency credential to teach departmentalized classes based on verification prior to assignment of teachers' adequate knowledge of the subject matter in which they are teaching, and has the consent of the teacher to be teaching that course. Ed Code 44258.7b authorizes the holder of non-physical education credential to coach competitive sports for 1 period of day. And we have a number of people listed under that Ed Code. The final Ed Code 44831 authorizes districts or county offices of education to employ persons in public school service as a speech-language pathologist if they can provide proof of a license issued by the Speech-Language Pathology and Audiology Board of the state. We have 2 such employees who are able to provide this certification, therefore would qualify under this ed code. So it is recommended that the Board of Education approve the teacher assignments under the above ed codes and adopt the 2 board resolutions 09/10-11 and 0910-12.
Thank you. Mrs. Cordero?
Well, first, I completely understand why the complexity of secondary schools really require this flexibility. And most of them, it's somewhat easy to imagine why a person with a certain credential and additional units would be able to teach the subject. But I was questioning where we have an instructor who has a single subject credential in PE, who is going to be teaching 4 periods of American government. And so based on this, we have to just sort of assume that somebody looked at their transcripts and determined that they had 18 units or 9 units of upper division instruction being taught in that subject. But sometimes I think it would be helpful, and I don't know how we would do this without necessarily making it unwieldy, to have some of that background, to know what, for example, what coursework this instructor has that qualifies him with a PE credential to teach American government. In addition, I was a little concerned about so many of the teachers who were teaching core English or reading classes, sort of being in these areas of having sort of an equivalency rather than the typical credential. Most of these I wasn't too concerned about because it seemed reasonable that they had the appropriate background education. But I'm still a little uneasy about not having really our teachers who are teaching those core areas have the credentials and certification that we would want them to have. And then one last thing, and that is on the very last page where it identifies the walk-on coaches, and it says these are people who hold a non-physical education credential, right? So they do hold some credential.
Yes, they do.
Okay. If in the future, when we present these, if we could just see what credential they hold, that would be helpful to me. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mrs. Deacon?
I noticed that we're required to do this annually. Does this mean a number of these teachers have been teaching outside of their credential area for multiple years? Or are these all new?
Well, there are definitely some new teachers in here, and certainly we have teachers who rotate throughout the years, different subject matter, coaching different sports or taking on different subject matter for us, helping us out with certain areas like picking up driver's education, which doesn't require a credential, but something that they have experience doing. But there are many people on here, yes, who do come back to us year to year. They have to remain qualified. They have to reauthorize their credentials. They have to make sure that they stay current. If they take classes and their transcripts are outdated, they must provide us evidence of those in order to stay qualified to remain teaching these courses.
Right. And is there any mechanism to encourage teachers that, say, have a credential in social studies but are teaching math to continue their education and take more math classes or work
Yes.
with math coaches?
In fact, we strongly encourage them to do that, especially when we're looking at expertise and experience, not necessarily being a replacement for having the appropriate credential, but certainly acknowledging that they have some skills and abilities that they can use in the classroom with students. But they are encouraged to complete either a minor and or test in that area or complete the full credential.
Okay, thank you.
And I can actually give some information on the core classes there's a number listed here for Lacumba, for example, where they have multiple subject credentials. That school has very deliberately combined their English and social studies classes into double periods for every student, at least double periods. And in that case, you either have to have a teacher that has a separate single subject English, single subject social studies, which is unusual,
Both unusual.
or the only other option is for it to be a multiple subject credential. So
Right.
that's why there's so many for that school in
Which would
particular.
allow these teachers to teach any subject matter
Mhm.
in that concept, but
Mhm.
using, particularly for the core.
May I add one other piece that I see a number of names of people who have had significant experience in the past in our district teaching in this subject area.
Dr. Noel?
So these are not first-timers?
No,
No. Probably there are some in there that
some
are
of
first
them
timers,
are, but not all of them, no.
yeah.
But if they are, they've had either 18 units total or 9 upper division units in the subject they're teaching.
Well, in this particular case for the core, it really requires that they have a multiple subject credential, and they teach for 2 or more periods in a particular setting with the same group of kids. Otherwise, they wouldn't be qualified to just teach English with a multiple subject credential. But this code does allow them to do a double period with the same group of students, and in this case, the core classes.
Thank you.
Okay, I need a motion on this. So you've moved to approve the resolutions 091011 and 091012.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
That passes unanimously.
Thank you.
And with that, we're moving on to the conference agenda. First up is F1, Report on Student Achievement Performance on Academic Performance Index, the API, and Adequate Yearly Progress, AYP.
Tonight, we have the much-awaited results from the State Accountability Program, Academic Performance Index, and the National Accountability Program through No Child Left Behind, the AYP, Adequate Yearly Progress, which leads to possible program improvement designation or holding on program improvement. I'm sure board members have already noticed the steeper trajectories for the lower performing students on graph after graph. Davis Hayden, Dr. Davis Hayden will be giving this presentation. He's our Director of Research, Evaluation, and Technology.
Hello. Well, thank you, Brian. Yes, and we did have some nice gains this year. So this first chart has a lot of information on it. So actually, let's see, this guy here has a pointer. Good. One of the things you notice is that the district stays at year 3. This is the elementary district. So the elementary district came very close to making its goals this year. It's very close, one category, and I know Robin and I have talked about that. We'd like to try and do something to have safe harbor or something like that, but I don't think it's going to happen. So we're staying at year 3. But we had a couple schools that were really nice surprises, like Franklin. It got a yes in all categories, and so it's frozen in year 3. It did not advance a year. And we also have some schools that we're going to be looking for safe harbor to fix them, in the sense that we look for demographic corrections. An English learner who date was missing, and if we can put the date in, it either puts them in or takes them out of a category. So we'll go through the data carefully to see if we can find data corrections. In this case, Cesar Chavez only missed making all of its marks by a couple of students in 2 or 3 categories. So it's very close. Same thing with Harding, same thing with McKinley, and same thing with Monroe. This means Santa Barbara Charter Elementary usually will not make it because of participation. They're not Title I, so it makes no difference in that regard. They'll never go into PI, but that's what this no means here. Overall, we had some solid gains in our growth in API, and you're going to see that in some charts in a few minutes. The district looked quite well in both the AYP and the API growth. And here's the API scores. Do you have any questions about this overall performance of the district and all the schools at this point?
I guess I didn't get it when you talked about what no participation means, as distinct from not being in.
Oh, I'm
Title-
sorry, I
not
probably
Title
should
I.
explain that a little bit further. They don't have enough students participating.
Oh, okay.
They typically have 80, 85%, and you need 95% of
Yeah.
your students being tested, otherwise you
Is
fail.
that because of waivers?
It's a mixture of things, yes, it's waivers, yeah, and it's also that I'm probably stepping out a little bit here, it's sort of the philosophy of the school not to put as much weight on testing.
Yeah.
And so I think that discouragement leads to what you just said. Okay, so if we go to the next slide, this is what Brian was just talking about. This is the elementary district, and this is the English language arts results. And we were going along, we were going up. We made a nice little rise last year. It looked very encouraging, and then we just jumped. And that's a very nice momentum. I know that some of the schools are going to build on that momentum, and there's no reason why we can't see some nice, now that we got certain programs in place, there's no reason why we can't gain. Many of our schools are quite low, so gaining shouldn't be hard to do. So we're looking forward to continuing this.
Can you put the state average on there?
Actually, the state average is now on your board focus goals. I don't think I don't have the state average on here. I can get that for you, but I
Well, if
didn't
you-
put it on here.
I didn't know how you calculated it. To come out with a single figure for all schools and all grades, is it a lot of averaging?
Well, for this, no, this is published in CDE's webpage. The elementary district is published on CDE.
For the district?
Yes.
Okay. And that's the percent, 50% means what?
50% are proficient,
Proficient?
yes.
Or better?
Or better, yes.
Okay, so you add those two.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I looked on just up a notch at the state level, and I got that the state average,
Not this one? Oh, I see, you mean right here?
no, my data are here.
Okay.
Okay. I just wanted to see how we did compared to the state average. We had a conversation once about that.
Yes.
And I came out with 52% for the elementary district. Is that consistent with you?
Actually, it's on your board focus goals. I could bring it up on the, on my computer right
Well,
now,
I
but
use
I
the
believe
same-
that's pretty close to what it is, yes.
I used the same algorithm to calculate that and then to calculate the state. And what I get is that we're 1 percentage point above the state average.
Well, that's probably pretty close. If I remember right, I did put the state averages now on your board focus goals, and my memory says that it was around 50%.
Yeah,
So I think you're correct with and that's also on the CDE webpage if you want to get it.
Well, I raised the point for the obvious reason that, well, we should and everyone should be very happy to see that increase. And
Absolutely.
it's a very substantial increase, that it still is bringing us up only to the state average.
And you're correct there, and that's why we've been in program improvement, and that's been a real big goal, I believe, of the programs that Robin and others have been putting into place, is to, hey, get this thing moving, and that's what we're seeing here. Now, will it continue? I sure hope so. If we get another jump like this, we'll jump above the state average.
That'd be spectacular. And my point is simply, we need to, absolutely, everyone who contributed to this should be celebrating.
Absolutely.
Mindful of the fact that it's still just the state average, and we have a long way to go.
I agree.
Thank you.
If we go to the next one, oops, I went 2. This is the math results. Again, a nice little bump up. And math is at 55. It's probably pretty close to what the state average is in that one, too.
Well, I have some different data. It's very interesting. In fact, you might be, in case you don't have all this on the top of your head, that in math, the state average is 60 and 57. Okay, so we haven't even gotten to the state average. However, in grade 6 and grades 5, we exceed the state average in math by substantial amounts. I hope I have that right. No, I beg your pardon. I'm for Latinos, okay? No, we don't, okay?
Okay.
Looking at all students. I broke this down by subgroup, and for Latinos particularly, and found this very heartening, that while we start at 53% in the state at 53% in second grade, by sixth grade, Santa Barbara's Latino average was 63% proficient in advanced, and the state average was only 36.
Bob, I need to correct you on something here. There's no AYP reported for grade levels. And so what you're looking at is you're looking at the STAR reporting of grade
Yes,
levels.
exactly.
And the STAR reporting of grade levels has inclusion and exclusion rules that are quite different from the AYP inclusion-exclusion rules. So you can't really take what you just said
So you're
and,
talking AYP rules?
yes.
Well, I hope everything I said isn't irrelevant, but
No, not irrelevant, but it's like a little bit, well, maybe not comparing apples to oranges, but maybe
yeah.
one type of apple with another
Well,
type of
do we
apple.
Well-
But Bob, I want to say that if you everybody who wants to listen to this, if you go onto the webpage for Santa Barbara School District, the state averages, this same type of data is put on that webpage with the state averages, so you can compare.
Okay.
And even all the subgroups are there too.
Well, do I get to feel joy when I look at how much better our Latino students are doing
Bob,
in math than the state average?
Bob, you can feel joy, yes. This is very good news for how hard the schools have been working. And I think you can feel joyous and celebrate. Now, of course, what we want to see is next year the same thing. And then we can really start to celebrate because we'll know that the programs truly are working and they're sustaining themselves. So I agree with you. You can feel joy.
Thanks a lot, David.
Okay, this is the subgroups, and once again, now this is a more expanded graph, and you can see some nice growths across the board for all the subgroups in the elementary district. This is the math subgroups. Once again, some nice growths everywhere. By the way, this strong growth here for your students with disability has a lot to do with the introduction of the CMA test and then continuing on with the CAM test this year. So that's a little bit, it's not quite accurate, but we'll take it.
I think, I'm sorry, but Mr. Heron and I were chatting not long ago about the achievement gap and how we're doing on it. And I think that it should be pointed out here that the slopes, if you look at whether you're looking at ELs or students with disabilities or Latinos, or socioeconomically disadvantaged, the slopes in the last 2 years of the last year are substantially greater than the slope for the white subgroup.
Well, I would agree with
And
this
that-
last
and
year.
that is exactly what we have to do.
I agree with this last year, that's true. And I think you see across the board that there is some nice evidence that there is stronger slopes in some of our subgroups than there is in the white. But you got to understand that the white population is going to have a ceiling effect, and it already is reaching it to some extent.
Yeah.
So our growth is not going to be in the white, the high SES. These are high. The white population has a higher SED than these other groups.
But see, but
So
my
that
point-
that group is probably, it may grow, but it's pretty much close to a ceiling effect.
See, look back to 20304 and 20405. There, just by examination,
Oh.
those slopes are identical to the up there, by vision.
I understand.
Okay, and I'm simply saying that, and if you kept on that way, you'd never close the gap. But that last year is very heartening because the gap is closing.
I agree. So if we go on, this
Wait,
is.
Mrs. Cordero?
Oh, sorry.
Well, I wanted to just, because I'm not as heartened by that as Dr. Noel is, because I look over the last, from 2003, 03, 04 to 08, 09, and it doesn't seem to me that the gap has closed very, very significantly. We still have, a very similar gap.
I would agree with you on that, but I think what Bob is pointing out, and what I'm trying, he's talking about the slopes here, is that these slopes here have a lot of growth they can continue on. This slope can't. It's going to peter out. And so if these slopes can continue, then the gap will start to be closed. So that's what we have the hope will happen.
Well, I
Well
understand
done.
what you're saying, but I also understand your point about the ceiling effect.
Yes.
I mean, part of the reason that the gap will close is because the white students have sort of hit a ceiling and they're not going any higher.
That's right.
It's not because we're actually, well, it's not, I mean, it's artificially closing the gap. Maybe not artificial, maybe because that's an organic part of the process, but the ceiling effect is coming into play there.
Well, I think we'd all, excuse me for saying it this way, I think we'd all rather keep the whites up here and have these people rise than have the whites come down to meet the rest of the subgroups.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yes.
But I'm just, my concern is that I would like to have seen more of a closing of that gap over those several years.
Well, I agree, but this is a difficult achievement to make. A slope of this magnitude is actually a very solid slope in terms of statistically moving a population to a higher academic achievement level. In fact, if we can maintain a slope of that nature, we're doing quite well. And I think that's from my statistical viewpoint, we're doing
So
quite well.
next year will be the key.
Yeah.
Dr. Noel?
Part of it is my context is I did some analysis some years ago that came up to 2002, okay? And I would say this to Mrs. Cordero, that it was really discouraging because the way the achievement gap was being closed, that the white line was coming down. And the Latino gap wasn't doing anything significant, which was, from my point of view, a very discouraging development because you're not closing it by raising Latino achievement. You're closing it by lowering the white subgroup achievement. I look at this and I say, that's nice to see none of that's going on. And again, the slopes, if you plot this stuff through time, I mean, yes, diminishing returns set in for the higher scores, regardless of what subgroup it is. If they get up there are diminishing returns. I agree with Davis. Those kinds of slopes, if you can maintain that kind of growth, you're on the right track.
And board members, as we go through, and obviously I will give everybody a chance to speak, but there is a lot of graphs to go through, so maybe we want to save further comments to the very end. Mr.
Sure, we
Herring?
can do it that way.
Just one comment on this,
Yeah.
because Susan and I met with Davis yesterday, and he made a really interesting point on the social economic disadvantage. You'll notice that the red and the brown lines are really close to each other. And what I think I understood Mr. Hayden saying is that the socioeconomic includes a tremendous amount of Latino. And that if we could focus also, not just on Latinos, but focus on ways to better the social economic group, Latino would go up as a result. And so there are things we can do, healthy food, computers, a lot of stuff that will help the social economic advantage that will in turn move the Latino group.
That's very true.
Mrs. Deacon?
Well, since I was in on that meeting too, I just wanted to follow up with that idea. I know historically, and it's been codified in the way we report this data, that we break it out into whites and Latinos, but in reality, there's a strong linkage between the socioeconomic disadvantaged group and the Latino groups, and if we were to pull out, say, the middle class or high socioeconomic status Latinos, their scores might very well be up there where the whites are too, and I know that's something that you've done previously that I'd like to see. I know it's very time consuming to do, but I think it's really important for us to look at this as not just an ethnicity issue, but a socioeconomic issue.
All right.
And a language issue.
In case you folks are not aware, the state now pulls that out. And starting in 2008, there is the Latino subgroup is broken down by socioeconomic status or vice versa. So you can't go back in time, but at least hence looking forward, we have that, and that's very helpful. And your observation is correct.
All right.
There's a substantial population of Latinos who are not socioeconomically disadvantaged, and they're doing quite well. There's still a gap, but they're doing quite well.
So this is the API, and that's one of the things we were just talking about. And unfortunately, API has, well, I don't know where I was going to go with that. I was thinking of something totally different. Okay, so this is your API for the elementary district. This is a secondary district. Secondary district, once again, it's not in PI, and we're happy for that. We had Goleta Valley that was in PI make all of its goals, and so it's frozen in year 1, and if they can make all their goals another year, it'll drop out of PI, and once again, very strong performance by Goleta Valley. La Cumbra, same thing, made all of its goals and is now frozen in year 5, and by that it means it can't actually go any higher in year 5, but it now has an opportunity to make all of its goals one more year and then drop out of PI. So we have 2 schools that are just really charging ahead, and you'll notice that now all 3 of these schools have APIs of 800 or higher. So that's an amazing growth in API. Santa Barbara Junior High had some problems, and it didn't manage to follow the success of the others. But you know, I mean, they're working hard too, and I'm sure they're going to be making some adjustments. La Colina is not Title I, and Santa Barbara Charter is not Title I.
I would like to just chime in and point out at this point that for La Colina, this is their 2nd year of not making AYP. So if they were Title I, they would be program improvement this year. And also pointing out Dos Pueblos is Title I. If they don't make AYP next year, all 3 of our high schools will be program improvement. So those are things that we need to be thinking about.
Exactly, and they advanced, each of them advanced into an extra year here, and they went into PI, and you're absolutely right. In terms...
And I would,
Dr. Noel.
just picking up a theme from the earlier discussion, and the place to make that progress is with disadvantaged students and minority students.
Yeah.
I'm sure that Mark is very unhappy with the $7.99. But anyway, this is your subgroup growth, and there is some growth in the secondary district. It's a large extent driven by the junior highs. And here is the, as I mentioned, the junior highs have had a very nice growth over the last, what is that, 6 years? So they've been really leading the charge for the secondary district. And that's it for my slides. Do you have any other questions? Hopefully you asked all of them, and we answered all of them already.
Any other comments? Mrs. Cordero?
I just wanted to clarify, when we were saying if we could get the information broken out by Latino students in terms of socioeconomic status, I also was wondering if we could get them broken out by English learners versus non-English learners.
The state webpage for STAR results does some of this, but we don't get that for the AYP. So once again, the STAR results is a whole different issue in terms of how it presents the raw results. And there's a lot of subdivisions now, as Dr. Noel was saying, there's a lot of subdivisions that they keep including in the STAR results, which is really nice. So anybody can look at that. To break it out, though, for AYP, I'd have to do that from the raw data. I can also do it in terms of taking the raw data and doing a lot of inclusion-exclusion rules on it. So we can do that type of analysis if I get enough free time. But you can still look at the webpage for the STAR results where, like Dr. Noel says, it is broken down quite a bit now on the STAR pages.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Hayden.
Sure.
We're running a little bit late at this point. We have a lot of people here on item F3, the update on status of special education. We have a major report from Eric Smith on the offset of one-time revenue reduction, item F2. What I'd like to do now is go ahead and jump to item F3, take the time for that, and then take our break and come back and spend the time that we need on the report on the plan to offset one-time revenue reduction. If there's no board objection to that, we will move on to F3, update on status of special education.
Tom Guajardo, our Executive Director for Special Education, will give this report.
Good evening, board members, Superintendent Sarvis, Ms. Sawaski, Mr. Smith, and the public. Just a quick update. We've had meetings with both the SBTA and CSCA, and really appreciate the work that Lane and Classified Association, we met with a field representative, the president and vice president, on a meet and confer. And we also have a instructional assistant formula that we had put together and presented to cabinet last week that was well received, and wanted to do a meet and confer with CSEA, and they welcomed that. They really appreciated us putting something together in writing, policies, procedures that can be straight above board, and so we'll be presenting that to the principals this Thursday and get their feedback before moving forward on that. Also wanted to thank, I'll tell you right now, we have one program specialist, Kirsten Escobedo, doing an excellent job. She's doing the job of 3 people, and phenomenal. As we get around to schools and visit, she's got a high level of credibility, and really appreciate her work as well as Dr. Carol Miller's work. And lastly, wanted to announce, back in April, we had a training collaborating in the IEP environment, and I read the feedback, very positively received by principals, and they asked others to attend, so that's been confirmed for the week of October 19th. We're having a 2 half days that week, and that's both for returning people who went through the first one in April, talk to the presenter, and because we have new personnel on board, they've been invited as well, and so that's really positive. And I want to introduce Dr. Carol Miller, who will update you on a couple of other items. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, thank you, Board, for approving me to continue through the district, with the district, through January 22nd. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. It's been a very busy 2 weeks. I've facilitated several IEPs and resolved a couple due process cases and some outstanding issues. And we're working on developing an autism class at Adams, and hopefully that will begin the 1st of December. And we're providing lots of technical support to staff and answering lots and lots of emails and phone calls. And I'm working on the FCMAT special report, and I would just like to overview 4 main areas of that. The special ed stakeholders work group will be held on Monday, September 28th, from 3:30 to 7:30, and the reason we are meeting in the late afternoon and the early evening is to accommodate a number of our teachers' requests and direct service providers like aides and other service providers so they can have more time with their students, so they would not be taken out of the classrooms. The overall process is basically at the September 28th meeting, we will review the 16 different categories of 153 FCMAT recommendations. We'll consolidate those and prioritize them by 5 different priority areas, and I'll talk about those a little later. And then after that meeting, we will hold community input forums in 3 different areas. One, Santa Barbara Junior High School, La Colina Junior High, and La Cumbra Junior High. After we get that input, then we will reconvene the stakeholders work group. And at that meeting, we will identify responsible entities for implementation and establish timelines. And then that information will be presented back to the board for recommendations and review. The next that I wanted to talk about was the roster, the work group roster for our stakeholders work group. First of all, I'd like to thank Lane Wheeler, who's been assisting me in seeking out more teachers. I mean, he's been working on this for days, and I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Lane. And we will not have co-chairs. Originally, we were going to have co-chairs. The district office staff will be serving as resources to the work group members, but they will not be work group members. For example, we will have someone in finance, personnel, special education in those areas. Steve Manharis will still be our facilitator at the 2 meetings, and he will not be a work group member. And Robert Sawinski will be our staff advisor, so that means she keeps things moving along. Regarding the meeting process, we will have the first meeting will basically be concentrating on looking at reviewing the categories of the recommendations and consolidating any duplications. And What we are going to do specifically is, first of all, we're going to all introduce ourselves and outline the task, and then we will, of course, it's Brown Act, so we will have public comments. And then we're going to divide the work group into subgroups to look at the suggested categories, and we've divided the 16 areas into like subgroups, so we've got 5 subgroups. For example, we're combining clusters. One cluster is communication and information resources. That's got the most recommendations, so that will be by itself. And then we're going to combine several other clusters. For example, advisory group, due process, school board, fiscal would be combined. Disability awareness, evaluation, and training will be combined. Instructional assistance, organizational supervision, and staffing will be combined as under one subgroup, and then IEPs, program student study teams will be combined. Then we are going to basically break into the subgroups, and we will have public comment. And then the subgroup meetings will not be open to the public comments, just for observation. And then we will reconvene the stakeholders work group and receive subgroup reports, and then decide on the recommendations based on discussions and consolidations of duplicates and priorities of the FCMAT recommendations. The priorities basically are in several categories. One priority would be, the first one would be, needs to be implemented immediately this school year. The next priority, B, would be important, but due to cost, staffing, and other constraints, needs to be implemented next year. And the next priority, C, would include, would require multiple years to implement. And then D would be, this is a duplicated area, needs to be consolidated with some other areas. And then the last is, this is not a priority at this time. Back on the work group, I just wanted to mention we do have organizations that will be involved, and we did seek out representatives from the Esperanza and also United Parents, Padres Unidos, and then also our Dyslexia Society will be there, and Alpha Resource Center, which we work very closely with. We also are looking at recruiting as many teachers as we can, and we have several other teachers with experiences in reading. And we are looking at our school site administrators. Our elementary principal will be Brent Milholland, and a junior high school principal would be Veronica Rogers, and our high school assistant principal representing high school is Jennifer Foster, and Jennifer is the representative to special education for that school and has done a lot on other committees, and she would be very helpful to us. So with that information, basically, let's see if I missed anything. That's basically a synopsis of you know, where we're going. And I would like to thank, I've got a lot of input, and you know, there's bumps in the road, and we need to back up over the bumps, but we need to move forward. And I appreciate all of the input from folks that have called me from the community. Because the recommendations along the way have been excellent. You know, some we've been able to do, some we have not. We've had a lot of parents that are interested through this process of representation. We cannot have everybody on the committee, so we've opened it up, and we try to build in as much public comment as possible.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. Okay. Do we have any public comment on this? All right, let's go ahead and take that.
Catherine Abaka, followed by Mrs. Smith.
Good evening, everyone. Congratulations to your son and all the other kids. It's awesome. You know, I was thinking next month marks 1 year since I started coming to board meetings. I don't think I've missed one yet. In October, when parents first came in front of this board and told you about their problems with special education, we waited for a response from Anissa McNeil. When that presentation came in November, we waited and she resigned. We waited for the board to act on the complaints from the parents, and we formed the Special Ed Advisory Council. In December, we waited for our new board members to join us. We're very happy about that. And interim directors were hired. We waited on the bids from various agencies to get a report on the status of special education. We waited through an unsuccessful vetting process, and we waited till the district hired then lost 2 candidates. We waited for the preliminary report, and we waited for the final report. We waited and then were pleased when the district found an interim candidate that we could hire and have some respect for. Thank you for Carol Miller. We waited again, and you hired an executive director that may or may not work out for the district. We waited, and we think you just hired some bodies, and we think that's what we're continuing to do. We waited to be asked to provide input regarding program specialists, only to find out you promoted a teacher who had the highest dissatisfaction among parents. Nobody asked us. We waited for you not to hire that person when we were again disappointed. And we also are waiting for you to hold principals responsible for their actions that go on in their schools and documenting the evidence. We waited then while you decided a stakeholders committee would be convened. We're still waiting for an announcement that a DLAC parent will take the place of Michael Gonzalez on the stakeholders meeting. We waited for community forums for discussion of the FCMAT. We're waiting to make changes till we have the stakeholders meeting and the subsequent community forums. Now we're waiting. We're frustrated because you've been given opportunity after opportunity to do great things for our school district, yet we're still waiting. We're still waiting for you to get it and for us to feel like you're committed rather than annoyed that we continue to be here. We are waiting for the board not to race to finish and just hire anyone, to make great and thoughtful decisions about hiring and programs. We know that we need to wait. We have waited, but now it just feels like we're getting thrown crumbs rather than the whole cookie. It's a kind of pretend collaboration in our minds, not a real one. We're just waiting for someone to step up and get it. We know that it didn't take us months to get into this mess. We know we're going to have to wait. We just want to see the process move a little bit faster. And it can't possibly be done when only one person and there's so much to do. So we want to be collaborative. We want to be asked about important things. And we really do want a transparent and collaborative association with the board, with the district, and with the administration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Baca. Mrs. Smith?
President Parker, members of the Santa Barbara School Board. I'm the parent representative to the SELPA CAC, and I'd like to announce Retta Slay's Lunch and Learn on Thursday, September 24th at the Goleta Community Center, 11:45 a.m., $15, and it's a brain gym introduction. Retta Slay is another parent representative to the CAC. She's quite a dynamo, and I too have stepped up to the plate, and I have developed what's called the Apple Core. It was something that came out of the Santa Barbara School District's CPAC that we would organize as parents. Every classroom of special education parents would organize around the special education teacher. We would have a child-centered, teacher-directed, parent-involved culture, and we wouldn't have to have any due process. But I want to let you know, after 16 years of volunteering my services as a teacher, a grant writer, and a festival producer, I'm announcing that I'm giving up. I'd like to explain why I've slipped from frustration and outrage to absolute despair and disgust. There was no administrator the first week before school, and only Maria Nielsen was there. She couldn't answer if I was supposed to bring Emily, a special education student, to Royal's return. The answer was no. I wasn't supposed to. A voice message from Tom Guajardo said he really appreciated the welcome and that his goal in special education was to close the achievement gap. I'm sorry. We're not interested in the achievement gap here. We're interested in compliance. I'm working with national leaders, educators, lawyers. Santa Barbara is going to be the focus of school corruption exposure. I want to explain that it is with chagrin and despair that I learned that the Special Education Task Force has been selected. Carolyn Menard and I and others asked to be on it. We thought it was going to be a self-selected group. And that the activist parents who have worked hard to bring the district into compliance were not only not placed on the task force, but there's no notification of the first meeting. And that first meeting, Dr. Carol Miller,
15 seconds, Mrs. Smith.
it's on Yom Kippur. It's the holiest day of the Jewish calendar. And I am goddamned incensed. This happened last year. There was a special
And-
education meeting called by Anise McNeil. It was notified only in English the day before the meeting. And it was on Yom Kippur. And you know what? I went so
Thank
I
you.
could
You're-
witness.
You're done now, Mrs. Smith.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith.
Well, I hope
And yes, at this point, we're going to take a break, 10 minutes with no board objection, so we can try to, yes,
Can we
Mr.
have a
Aaron.
discussion?
Oh, is
more-
there,
And more questions? Are you going to come back to this after the break, or are you going to continue this?
if you want to have your, yeah, we can take discussion
May
questions
we
now.
continue?
Yeah, absolutely. Mr. Herron?
Yes. What communication is going to take place for the 3 communities meetings? What is the plan to make, what is the plan for the 3 community meetings to get attendance and get the word out, and to how broad in the community?
We will advertise wisely. We want to be very widely. We want to be very broad for the attendance. And hopefully we will publish it widely. We will be securing the dates and talking about those dates at the meeting on Monday.
Okay. I'd just like to make sure you really work on that broad dissemination. I mean,
Okay.
it's got to be more than just news releases or press. It's got to be really invitations to an awful lot of people. The other thing is, there's been a heck of an amount of time and effort by a wide variety of people. A group today, this is my 13th hour here sitting in these seats today. We interviewed 8 or 9 or 10 potential directors of special ed. We've done this for executive director 2 or 3 times. All the specialists, we had meetings to interview people. There is absolutely no effort to hire somebody who is not qualified to do the job, period, end of statement. We are interviewing people, and we will find the right people for these jobs. And if anybody thinks we're just hiring bodies, that is absolutely wrong.
Dr. Noel?
Yeah, I just wondered if you had, when you gave that roster information, if there's a hard copy of that we might be able to get and that the public could get.
Yes. Yes, we will be providing that.
Can we do it tonight? So it's information that was introduced at the meeting. I mean, if you have, I don't know whether
We
you
have
just had notes or
information,
whether you had.
we have initial information that was sent out to the task force members, and that a preliminary agenda is posted out front. We are finishing up an agenda and will be posted within the timelines, and we hope to post that late tomorrow afternoon. And the original preliminary list, we can provide that, yes.
What about this, what you announced here tonight?
That will be on the agenda, and that is all going to be posted
the
hopefully
roster will
tomorrow.
be on the
Yes,
agenda?
yeah, we will have that as a posting as well.
And when will that be?
Well, we have 72 hours, so we will be posting it hopefully tomorrow afternoon
Okay,
or Thursday morning.
Can we get it on the website as well?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I think
Yes.
it's very important. The agenda and the roster.
Yes.
Great, thank you very much.
Mrs. Cordero?
I just wanted to make another plea for trying to have our community meetings conducted bilingually rather than simply, I'm hoping that at the very least they would be translated, but rather than simply being translated, if they could be bilingual meetings, I think that is a lot more welcoming to the Spanish-speaking community.
All right, at this point, with no objection from the board, we will take a 10-minute break and return to item F2, report on plan to offset one-time revenue reduction of $3.4 million from the state of California. Are returning to item F2, report on plan to offset one-time revenue reduction of $3.4 million from the state of California.
Well, I haven't been as thrilled about anything since I was thrilled about higher test performance. But Eric Smith has done an outstanding job putting a plan together, and Eric Smith, our deputy superintendent, will give this presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Sarvis. I can't take all the credit. Meg Jate was instrumental in putting this together as well. But as by way of introduction, as you know, on July 28th, 2009, the governor and legislature finally agreed on a budget package to close the state's massive $26 billion deficit. That budget deal was basically accomplished through a combination of spending cuts, deferrals, major borrowing from local government, and other one-time solutions and gimmicks. As we reported in August, probably the most egregious of these gimmicks was to give us money and then take it away in the subsequent fiscal year. We're being inflicted with a one-time reduction of $252.83 per dollar ADA, which constitutes about $3.4 million in lost revenue to our districts in fiscal year 9-10. Obviously, that's not something we can take lightly. Immediately, once we got the figures finalized, we started looking at a plan on how we could address this issue. Due to the magnitude of the loss, we've scrutinized basically everything we could do to come up with these funds without affecting instructional program or resultant job loss, because this is a one-time reduction, and we tried to address it as such. In the interim, we placed a freeze on state categoricals until we could figure out where we were, and we basically left many positions that were deemed unessential or non-essential vacant. We've really done our best to try and cobble together a solution that would give us $1.1 million in the elementary and $2.4 million, or $2.3 million rather, in the secondary district. So when the state does come to take this money, we can do it and do it in such a way that we're not adversely affected. So what we've done is put together a plan, items A through H. I'd like to walk through those. The plan represents our best thinking given the time frame that we're dealing with. Obviously, it's not exhaustive, but I think it represents our best thinking given the flexibility and latitude we had that both the state budget and the board has given us to deal with this issue.
Is there going to be, I'm wondering if we could put the last page up on the screen. I don't know if that's possible.
The table?
Just the table at the end so that people that are watching this might be able to see what you're referring to.
And I'll try to go slow because I realize there's a lot of esoteric material in here. As we went through it, I was thinking to myself, how am I going to explain that? But I'm going to need a little light, so I don't know how I'm going to do that. So what we tried to do was basically identify amounts that were both in the secondary and in the elementary district because of the revenue loss in each district respectively. We knew that it would be easier to get there in the secondary district because we started out in a better position. We started out in a better position in the secondary district primarily due to the result of the one-time sweep of restricted ending balances, which is item A, decrease unrestricted general fund reserve by amount of restricted ending balance sweep. As you remember, in the budget, we have the flexibility to sweep restricted ending balances from the restricted side to the unrestricted side of the ledger. That really accounted for a large portion of our increased ending balance, roughly $2 million worth, where we ended the year in 8-9 at about 8.29%. If we remove that and basically sequester it so we can pay that back to the state, that'll drop our reserve to about 5.24%. As you can see, $282,850 of that was in the elementary district. $1.7 million roughly in the secondary district. So that gets us some good footing. The second issue was B, which is reduced routine restricted maintenance account in the secondary district by $523,443 on a one-time basis. The State Budget Act provides us flexibility to reduce the RRMA, as it's called, from 3% of total expenditures to 0. We identified within the RRMA, we had a placeholder of $500,000, meaning the personnel was not tied to it, so therefore by dropping that line item in the budget, there would be no reduction in force and personnel. Obviously, we give up, doing some things this year, but we thought it was basically a worthwhile trade-off. That was entirely in the secondary district. Item C, designate funds from, pending settlement agreement with Cottage Hospital. It recently came to our attention that Cottage Hospital owed us, the Santa Barbara School District, $62,431, basically due to their expansion of their facility located at Pueblo and Bass Streets in Santa Barbara. Apparently, the regulatory agency that permits hospitals, which is called OSHPD, the Office of Statewide Health Planning and Development, was neither aware nor equipped to collect fees on our behalf. It would be similar to like DSA issuing a permit and the city actually building something. Well, they wouldn't know what the city was doing there either. And basically, you have a state agency that's unaware that there's a fee being imposed on behalf of the school district. Cottage has approached us. We've had very good discussions with them. We both realize that a settlement agreement would be the most effective vehicle to resolve this. If the revenue comes back through a settlement agreement, it actually comes back as unrestricted. However, since the origin of this was basically developer fees, we would propose that we use a 50-50 split and deposit it 50% elementary, 50% secondary. Transfer fund balance, item D, transfer fund balance from inactive workers' compensation self-insurance fund. We've had previous discussions, I know, extensively about workers' compensation. In fiscal year 2003-2004, the district abandoned their self-insured workers' compensation program administered by Keenan. The district subsequently sold the tail on claims to an insurance group called Fremont. They subsequently went bankrupt. We'd been in negotiations with their excess carrier about the amount that the insurance carrier or excess insurance carrier would basically pay and how much we would be liable for. As a result of those discussions through our legal counsel, we've identified about $200,000 needed to be set up as a liability to pay those outstanding claims. We have set that up. It is in Fund 67. But having said that, we've still identified greater than $500,000 that's basically residual revenue that's been sitting in that fund. So at this point, we think we can safely transfer that ending balance and move it to be designated to be sequestered when the state comes and actually asks for their money. So that's $500,000 with a 70-30 split, $150,000 accruing to the elementary, $350,000 going to the secondary district. Item E, designate excess, that is basic aid property taxes in the elementary district for payment to the state. The elementary district in principle will become basic aid this year, but won't be certified until P2, which is February of 2010. So once a district receives basic aid status, it can no longer receive ERAF. And ERAF is the Educational Revenue Augmentation Fund, which basically was the property tax shift from cities, counties, and special districts that started in the early 90s to fund K-12, actually K-14 education, so that the state could fulfill their constitutional obligation for fully funding education. Well, ERAF can neither push you into nor push you out of basic aid. So just like an ERAF distribution can no longer, in as much as it can't push you into basic status, if there's a negative adjustment, it can't push you out of basic aid status. And we use a form between our office, the county office, and the auditor controller. It's called the J29B, which is a summary of property taxes. We're seeing a negative ERAF adjustment on that form in the amount of about $124,704. Well, that's not permissible, so we get those taxes back, and we can basically identify or basically sequester those dollars so when we have to surrender them to the state. That's totally in the elementary district. Item F, recalculate K-3 class size reduction, apportionment based on passage of Assembly Bill X42, that's the budget bill. What happened there is that we based our budget on K-3 CSR based on what we thought the projected cohort would be, K-3. The budget made clear that basically the K-3 funding would be based on the provisional application filed in 8-9, meaning the estimate of what we would receive in 8-9 will be the base year to calculate funding for 9-10. As you can see, there's a difference in the cohorts. Basically, in the 8-9, we had a 23, or actually in 9-10, we expected 2369. In 8-9, our estimated application numbers were 2509. So once you plug that into the model and then actually reduce it by those penalties, because remember, you don't get all the revenue, they get watered down, that still gets us $83,967 in the elementary. G, you're going to love this one. This is getting really esoteric. Recognize property taxes due to reduction in charter school in lieu taxes. The state budget requires that charter school funding levels be reduced commensurate with the level of reductions imposed on revenue limit districts, including categorical funding. So as we talk about our revenue limit entitlement being reduced, so is the charter school block grant funding entitlement. When that occurs, since we're required to give them what's called in lieu property taxes, if their bucket is shrunk, that shrinks the amount of property taxes that we have to pass over. If we're in basic aid status, if we don't have to pass them over to a different bucket, they stay in our bucket and flow over the top of the bucket. That's probably the best way to put it. Okay, I'm pleased with that. Yeah, ironic.
Keep the rest of it at that level, will you?
Ironic. And then, as I said, we knew that it was going to be a struggle to come to find the elementary amount. So we were really scrambling, looking for ways that we would be able to come up with it. We knew we had more than enough in terms of the total take. So we discussed with our auditors, you know, we'd identified that in 8-9, the Meals for Needy revenue limit add-on, a large portion of that had been paid over to the elementary district from the secondary district revenue limit. But in 07-08, that did not occur. So we're proposing that basically there's actually a transfer of funds between the secondary and elementary, and that's why in item H, you don't see an increase in total revenue. What you're seeing is like a contribution. You're seeing a negative on one side of the ledger and a positive on the other. So if we make that adjustment, you get the 1.1 in the elementary and the 2.3 in the secondary. And in the interest of transparency, that's the way we tried to break it out so everybody could see what was going on. So in summary, that's the plan. What we'd probably propose at the next board meeting is that we'd set up a separate fund and transfer the money into it, if that was something the board would like to do. The other thing I probably should speak to is, as you know, we've frozen all the site states categoricals until we could figure this out. And the theory there was that we couldn't let the cow out of the barn until we knew, you know, whether we were going to have to use those state categoricals to offset the amount of money that the state would take back from us. I think we've been able to put together a plan that would allow us to unfreeze, or some people are saying defrost those categoricals. We've done it in such a way where it won't impact the sites, won't impact the instructional program, and results in no job loss. So we're pretty proud of the plan, and we'd be more than happy to answer any questions about it.
No pressure, Mr. Smith, but I like this plan so much. This is what I'd like to see in the spring. You have raised the bar pretty high now. Talk about keeping things away from the classroom. This is amazing. So I know that we'll be coming at cutting the budget again in the spring, which is going to be horrible.
Right.
It'd be so nice to have this.
Well, we might be able to do some things. I'm not promising we can.
Pull something out of the hat.
That's exactly what I was thinking, was how many more rabbits can we pull out of this hat? But my hats are off to both you and Ms. Jate for finding these really creative ways to recover some of this funding.
Well, you know what's funny about it is, like, Meg was, I think she was out of town one day, and we were down to like the last 89,000, and she's saying, actually, that we were a little farther out, and I'd found some things, and I told her, like, well, we're down to 89, and she's going, well, he's never going to find that 89,000, and then we come back and we figured it out, but.
Mr. Herron?
What am I missing on that bottom line? The numbers don't seem to add up to 3.4. It's 1.1 and 2.6.
Oh, you know what happened?
3.7.
Is what happened is that negative, the brackets, which is a contribution, got added in when the table was
Okay.
done.
So that's just an error on the
Yeah,
table.
it's just an error on the table.
But the total is 3.4.
The total is 3.4.
I
Mrs.
had
Deacon?
a question about the maintenance account, just because I know this is routine restricted maintenance. So if there was a catastrophe, like a water main broke or something like that, how much do we have in that account?
Well,
to
we
draw
have
upon?
deferred maintenance too.
Okay.
And so it's a separate fund that we transfer money into. So I don't know what our balance is right now. Do you know what it is in deferred maintenance?
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if Meg does either.
But you're comfortable that
Yeah,
we have plenty
if we had
for
an emergency, we could
emergencies?
deal with that.
Because LA's got water mains
Yeah.
popping everywhere.
Mrs. Cordero?
First, I want to say, I mean, you made us so happy with this report. But I do have a question about whether there's been, and maybe this is for Ms. Sawaski or Dr. Sarvis, has there been any discussion of this with the charter schools? Because it stands to impact them fairly significantly.
You want to address that, Meg?
We have notified the charter schools. They are very much aware of the decrease in the base revenue limit that they've taken. They're very much aware of it. They've also seen, I do a calculation of the in lieu of property taxes, which states it very clearly what their entitlement is and how much property taxes they're going to get. They're going to be solely funded by property taxes as far as that revenue limit or the general purpose block grant. So they're very much aware of it. They get a printout every month saying how much went into their account and in lieu and how, if anything has changed. As the state changes, we change that calculation.
Yeah, and I think I should be clear, there's nothing in the plan that we are doing that affects them. It's on the
strictly state.
natural. It's what the state's doing will adversely affect them.
Thank
It's
you.
just a positive unintended consequence for us.
Mrs.
Thank you.
Deacon?
Well, and I just wanted to say, looking at this really reinforced the idea that we did make the right choice in moving towards basic aid, because we're already seeing the benefits of doing that, even though it was a hard choice. Limiting the interdistrict transfers, it really made a difference.
Any other questions or comments? This is on the conference agenda item, but Dr. Sarvis, did you want to talk about that?
We're recommending that the board approve the plan now rather than wait until our next meeting. We're recommending that because, as Eric said, the state categorical funds are frozen. They're wanting to move ahead with their single plans, and they need that money. They were concerned they were going to have to cut positions, that they just wouldn't be able to move forward with their plans, and they really do need that money.
Mr. Herron?
Yeah, yes, I know they've already cut some positions because of that have been communicated with me. So what is the language you would have to use to approve it now without waiting a week?
You
That the
don't-
board approve the plan to offset one-time revenue reduction of $3.4 million from the state. In other words, approve and go ahead with the title.
But don't we have to say something about with doing it without a second reading or?
No. The board may always comment, provide direction, or take action on these items, as it says on the agenda itself. So we can do it. We don't usually do it, but when some things are very non-controversial and needed, then we do take action. So would there be a board member willing to
I'll
make a
make that
motion?
motion that Dr. Sarvis just said.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion?
Oh, I think we have public comment.
We do
We have
two-
public comment.
Yeah, we do have Lane Wheeler.
The man waving in the back. Sorry, let me make sure that's on. Now, Try again.
I feel so participatory. Well, this is quite a love fest tonight, and I too would like to add my thanks to Mr. Tay and Mr. Smith for an extraordinary job in working their way through a very complex situation. I would also like to add my appreciation of Mr. Smith's comments regarding the state's smoke and mirrors budget and the give and take that they have done so freely with the money that we need to educate students in the Santa Barbara School District and throughout the state of California. I would like to also commend the Finance Department for really not making any personnel cuts here, and also for thinking outside the box. Really did a superior job, and as you've all said, the bar has been raised for the 10-11 budget, and with this platform, I'm sure we can expect equally great things. SBTA would not come to you without a request, and the request is that the board pass a proclamation that would prevent Mr. Smith from running with the Bulls in Spain next year, because I don't think we can afford to lose him to a Goring. So I will ask you to move that as an action item on the agenda. And thank you both, Mr. Smith and Mr. Day. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we do have a motion out there. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? It passes unanimously.
Thank you, Board. We'll let our sites know right away.
Thank you. That's great. At this point, we're going to move on to item F4, the report on California Partnership for Achieving Student Success, CalPAS.
Robin, did you want to introduce this, or shall we go cut right to Cynthia?
Let's cut right to Dr. Cynthia White with the CalPAS.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, board members, Dr. Sarvis, Ms. Sawatsky, and Mr. Smith. We're here this evening. Actually, I have a team with me to speak about CalPAS. CalPAS is a professional learning council that the board approved a couple of years ago. So we're giving you an update on our participation in CalPAS. CalPAS is California Partnership for Achieving Student Success. And I'm going to just do the intro, and then I'm going to introduce my team members who are going to talk to you about CalPAS English Language Arts Council and CalPAS Math. So CalPAS, I love this because CalPAS is an initiative that supports faculty in meeting intersegmentally, and I hadn't heard this word before. And intersegmentally means that we're meeting K-12, we're meeting with the city college levels, the UCs, and the CSUs. And our goal in CalPAS is to remove barriers for students moving from the 12th grade into their next level of college. And so we have been working on curriculum alignment and professional development. CalPAS, this is just kind of their graphic on that. And CalPAS also has a second portion to it, and that's where we share data so that we can eventually, we've tried to pull a little bit of data, but that's not been as successful, the CalPAS data share between the K-12 and post-secondary education. This summer, 4 of our CalPAS members participated in the Access Initiative, and it's the aligning of curriculum, career education for student success. And so Wayne Cole and Todd Borden are going to speak to you about their participation in this project. We are very proud of Santa Barbara because we had such strong participation in CalPAS. We're one of the strongest CalPAS in the state. These were the regions participating in CalPAS for aligning the curriculum, and this is so that our students can be more successful in transitioning from 12th grade into college. The Access Initiative is looking at K-12 standards. The City College don't have standards, they have learning outcomes, and so we looked at those things and looked for alignment. There are 26 CalPASs that participated in of the 67 in the state. This is a 2-year project, and we have a year and a half to go in completing this alignment. So this year, we're actually working on curriculum, and there are 300 faculty and 26 of these Access PLCs that are working on the curriculum alignment. This was our summer convening, happened in June, and there were 53 participants, and you can see by segment HS, meaning 31 high school faculty, 18 city college faculty across the state, 4 university faculty. I'm going to have Brianna Locks come and talk to you, Locks Adams from Santa Barbara Junior High School, who is our lead for CalPAS Math. And then following Brianna is Wayne Cole, who went to the Access and worked on some of the alignment of curriculum, and then Todd Borden from Dos Pueblos will speak to you about the English Language Arts alignment. We're very excited about this because this actually aligns with what we're doing right now in our own curriculum in the LEAP process, and what we're doing with English Language Arts with some of the Jonathan LeMaster trainings that we've had. So this is actually relevant not just to what we're doing with the colleges, but what we're doing also with our secondary schools. So, Ms. Adams.
Good evening. So I'll just rewind you a bit. The Santa Barbara CalPAS PLCs were established in May of 2008. Representatives from many of our district schools, as well as private schools and community college and UCSB, all went to a kickoff meeting at Santa Barbara City College. And that's the day I said I'd be the co-chair for this group. So we made a meeting schedule for the 2008-2009 year, and we're continuing meetings this year. We meet once a month, a total of 8 meetings. We take December and January off with the breaks and the different schedules of the community college and UCSB, and reconvene in February. So we actually had our first meeting for this school year earlier this month, and we have the next one coming up in the first week of October. After a widespread recruitment effort, these are the schools and organizations and colleges and universities that attend on a regular basis. So you can see in the left-hand column, those are all of our district schools, and then we have our county office of ed, and Cynthia comes as a representative from the district office, and then some of our other local colleges and universities. And so we've been focusing on a wide variety of topics, and we've had many opportunities. We've gone to UCSB to speak or to listen to some of their speakers in their nanoscience department. We had Dr. Robert Elmore from City College come and present to us on the placement system for students to place into math courses. And it was an interesting year coming up with topics to discuss. And so the Access Grant has really brought us together and streamlined us. Some of our focuses were that we really just developed a communication between not only continuing to foster communication in our own district schools, but outside of that with UCSB, Santa Barbara City College, and Allen Hancock College. And it was interesting to make some of the higher education agencies aware of the California state standards and bring them up to speed with how we operate. And then the exciting news that we were selected for the Access Grant project. So our challenges were that we didn't have much of a focus, but now our next step is that the Access Grant gives us a lot to focus on and expected outcomes that we are very excited to work on.
Brianna, could you comment on the work on the entry exams for City College? I know that was one of your bullet items, and that's something the board has talked about a number of times.
Well, Dr. Elmore came, he spoke about the different exams that they offer, the different course pathways, and how students can opt to take certain exams to place into certain courses and their passing requirements, or if they don't pass, they go back and place into the level prior to what the exam was designed for. And so our concern from the school district was that our students come out of our programs and should be placing into higher level courses, but end up taking levels or repeating levels that they've already successfully passed. And so we wanted to explore why this was happening and really dig into what their process was and how we could boost our efforts on our end by collaborating with the City College to develop any kind of preparation or to administer the tests on our campuses. I think Dos Pueblos is already doing that. So we're just trying to piece the puzzle together. So I'll invite Wayne Cole up here to talk about the summer convening and the Access Grant project.
Good evening, Wayne Cole, Santa Barbara High School. Did my 38th back-to-school night last week. That's an indication of the longevity here. And I got to do something pretty cool. I got to go to the Access Initiative, so let's see what happens. Here goes. The coursework between high school and college is not connected. Students graduate from high school under one set of standards. 3 months later, they're required to meet a whole new set, according to some folks at the Stanford Bridge Project. So it's that quote and that attitude that got the Access program started. So the CalPass people applied for some grant money to create this event called the Access Initiative. I like this slide because it has plus signs and equal signs and stuff. Kind of looks like math, you know. But I was told to, you always add like terms, and I'm not sure I like all those terms, but anyway, you probably like that last one, outside funding sources. So this is not coming from the state. These are foundations that are donating to solve this problem of misalignment. So I'm going backwards. Let's go forwards. There we go. So our charge is to develop these entrance and exit competencies. We want to show how these courses within discipline are currently aligned or misaligned. It appeared to us, 26 different math people from all the different levels at this conference, that we're pretty much talking the same language in math about what constitutes second-year algebra, what constitutes pre-calculus. There isn't a big misalignment problem to deal with. I call that a success. So once we get that under our belt, we're going to create this curriculum map that's going to guide students and teachers, draft curriculum guides that will inform their daily practice of teaching. And here's the kicker here. Apply what we learned to make systematic improvements to California's fragmented educational system. Wow, wouldn't that be great? But that's what we're going to try and do. This scary slide here, I think the purpose I put it on here is to show you the areas of concern. Algebras 2, intermediate algebra, pre-calculus and statistics were the areas that we looked at. You can see that we're creating entrance competencies. What's it take to get into that class and be successful? And then exit competencies. What do we want to accomplish in those classes so they're successful at the next level? And then we're going to fill in these blanks with all these model assessments and stuff to guide teachers. Okay. So we got together down in Ontario, and this is what we did. I want you to understand, we underlined it and we put it in red, just how little we did. We developed a draft, okay? It's not the real thing, it's a draft, okay? And we took a first look at alignment, okay? We didn't finish that, we took a first look, and we began to create. So we got lots of work to do, and that's what's gonna happen with Brianna in the PLCs this year, is we kind of fleshed this start out to create something by the end of 2010. Okay. I'm very excited about CTE. We haven't even started that process, Career Technical Education. We're going to ask the City College people in their career-oriented disciplines, nursing, for example, to share with us the math that their students need, so we can kind of make that transition easier for the students. I'm very excited about that. How many times in my math class? When are we ever going to use this? Well, we can have some answers there. I'm very excited about career technical education getting on board. And there's our goal. By the end of spring 2010, we'll have created these model assessments and assignments for each one of those competencies that we've identified this year. I'm glad Brianna did a great job of talking about this last one. We want to motivate the schools to adopt our recommendations. This is just a bunch of math teachers getting together on their own time who are concerned about making the transition from college, from high school to college easier. We're not the State Board of Education. We're not some board of experts. So that'll be a challenge, motivating schools to adopt what we come up with. And then what we really need to do, and Dr. Sarvis already mentioned it, we got to look at those placement tests. They're statewide. There's 97 different ones. I can't remember the figure, but they're just not consistent, and it is causing problems. All right, I get to introduce a former Santa Barbara High School teacher, Todd Borden.
Good evening, everyone. I'm very lucky to have followed two good speakers, and so you've got a good background on what we did this summer, and now I just get to talk about English. And my experience in English and the teacher I am today started with a collaboration with City College, and it was about 10 years ago when Kathy Malloy came to talk to us at Dos Pueblos, and she said some things that afternoon that changed everything I do about teaching. And it really can be distilled down to the fact that she said, your students, when they come out of Dos Pueblos, assess higher in writing than they do in reading. And this is very counterintuitive to us because we thought for years and years that writing was where the deficiency was. And she said, no, not that you don't need help there, but this is the bigger issue. And it started me down this path of what can we do for them in reading. And now this is kind of accepted dogma, but it was more revolutionary then. About 5 years ago, I started teaching a City College class, a dual enrollment class, and I worked with City College, and the working with them was amazing, and it allowed me to see how we needed to articulate our curriculum with City College. But there was no mechanism for it. It was like me going there and them giving up their time, and we try to steal a bit here and there, and everyone knew that it was good conversations that were going on, but there was nothing kind of institutionalized. And CalPAS has kind of jumped into that breach, and they've helped us with that regard. And so now once a month we meet with two City College teachers, and we've got a very good relationship going, and I'm very excited about the things that we've done. And Access has kind of just accelerated the conversation even more. And while our English PLC kind of officially encompasses more than Santa Barbara's high schools and the city colleges, that in reality is where the real rubber hits the road. I mean, for our students, the ones that we're trying to reach are the kind of middle student, the kind of traditionally neglected middle, the 25th to 70th percentile students who are not going straight on to UCs or CSUs. They're going to City College. And being able to focus on them and understand what they need to do to matriculate to the next level has been very, very valuable. And so at Access, we were able to conference with CSU professors and some university professors. And there was a whole lot of kind of aha moments in the room, but the biggest disconnect, and then you can probably see this one coming, is that the California state content standards don't articulate perfectly with the skills they need in community college. And if anything, the skills that they're telling us they need to make this student successful, they by the CSU teachers and the City College teachers, are lower than what we had kind of imagined all these years. That we really thought we needed to, kind of walk on water, and they're saying that's not the case, but they need certain things done well. And what it means is kind of, winnowing down the number of standards in some way. So anyway, that's my introduction, how I got involved and why I'm excited about it. And I only brought one slide, and it's this. And this took quite a long time to come up with, but what it is kind of what we're doing right now at Dos Pueblos, and what the CSU teachers are saying that they need for student success. And I think that the CSU teachers even took the community college teachers by surprise in some of these regards. And they're coming at it from more of a strictly rhetoric-based study. But basically, on the left, that's the old traditional ways that we've done things. And it's things like, 2 to 4 essays per semester, maybe a research paper per year, modes of writing being expository, persuasive, biographical. Whereas at the CSU, they're asking for more deconstruction of a writer's, method, greater emphasis on understanding what you need to do when you read an essay and what you need to do to respond to it. More of a holistic grading, less, ticky-tack stuff that they say that we get too bogged down in high school. Things like the greater role of fiction in the high school, whereas they're emphasizing nonfiction texts exclusively. Research being, this kind of, in high school, there's this research paper that you come up with, whereas in the Cal State system, it was smaller, more frequent uses of research that were more designed by the teacher and not left up to the student to come up with. And this kind of global statement at the end that in the high school, there's more of an emphasis on the production of written work, whereas at the CSU, it's more of an emphasis on critical reading and critical writing that accompanies it. So that came directly out of the Access program, and I've been sharing it with some people, including some of your colleagues at City College, and it's creating quite a stir, here and there. But I think its emphasis, it's evident that what we did at Access really is coming back and is moving our curriculum and moving some of the ways that we address children's needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Board members. Mrs. Cordero.
Of course, this really gets my attention because, for one, Kathy Malloy is a very good friend of mine, and she deserves the praise that you're giving her. And also because this is my field of instruction, and so I'm really happy to see the recognition of the emphasis on critical reading and critical thinking and analysis of argument, et cetera, because has been at the community college level one of the areas that we have seen students struggle in coming out of high school, and the emphasis on nonfiction versus such an emphasis on fiction. So, that's my day job, and I taught it today. So I just think that that's something that we have hoped that to kind of articulate with the high schools, and so I'm glad to see that happening. And certainly with math as well. I'm not as familiar with that curriculum, but I am familiar with our testing processes and the fact that a lot of the students who come to us test below college level, even though they've taken what we would have assumed classes that we would have assumed would have prepared them to score at the college level. So I'm glad to see that we're working on trying to articulate with that, both from the community college direction and also from the high school direction. So thank you very much for the work that you're doing, because I think it will really benefit our students.
Mrs. Deacon?
As someone who had a former day job as a community college instructor, I have to say this really resonated with me too as well. And I participated in a lot of reading and writing assessment placement test for students coming into City College. And the chart you showed there with the distinction between the high school emphasis and the CSU emphasis was stuff I saw in the student writing that I read quite often coming from the high school. So I'm really glad you're addressing this. And same with the math. I mean, this is exciting. To be honest, when I saw this on the agenda, I wasn't quite sure what this was going to feel like, but I'm really excited. You've all done a terrific job, and I think this is really valuable work, so thank you.
Dr. Noel.
Yeah, I just wondered, is the emphasis mostly on community college, the interface with the community colleges?
I'm sorry, Mr. Borden, we need a mic on you.
Officially, it is not, but in my mind, it really is, because the students that are going on to UCs and CSUs have been succeeding for a number of years, or succeeding to a greater degree. The numbers of students that pass the entrance exams in those institutions are higher than they are at City College. And so, while we do want to address everyone, I think the greatest need is between our students who go off to City College and trying to make sure that they assess into the highest level they can to try to ensure their success, or magnify their ability to succeed there.
I had one other question. I have the impression that the International Baccalaureate program at your school may do a better job in preparing kids for university work than
AP?
Well, than AP classes, for example, and it has to do with the best way to connect them for that level of work.
I think
I didn't make a question out of that, but maybe you just comment on it.
Yeah, I think it's kind of an unassailable point that IB is doing a very good job there. I would be hard-pressed to tell you that it does a better job than AP, but it absolutely does a great job. But I offer a third track there, which is the dual enrollment class, and I think that the dual enrollment class does a splendid job of preparing the students for college as well. The IB and the AP tend to be a little bit more highly academic as academic disciplines, whereas my class is a little bit more of a skill-based class.
Is yours AP?
No, mine's a dual enrollment class. So I'm teaching
okay.
Santa Barbara City
Yeah.
College English 110. And so I'm not thinking that I'm going to be preparing English majors or liberal arts majors. I'm thinking about preparing all students for college, and it's a little bit more of a practical approach. But IB and AP are wonderful.
I was thinking of it from a political science and history point of view, particularly. And okay, thank you very much.
I have to say, first of all, it's wonderful to have something come back to us on conference, to see something that was put in place and has kind of been floating out there, to come back and see that it's really moving forward. And this is exactly the kind of conversation that we like to see happening between our elementaries and junior highs and high schools, and to see it happening in this larger way. It's tremendous. And of course, I also have some hope from the way you're presenting that it's not just a conversation, and that there may be hope, at least within our own district.
If you gave me 10 more minutes, I'll tell you what we're doing at DP. I mean, we are putting it into place. There's no doubt about it.
Absolutely. Great. That's really good to hear. And so I guess further updates as they come, as progress goes forward. Do we have public comment on this?
Mrs. Smith, you have 4 minutes remaining. You can use 3 here and 1 later, or 2 here and 2 later, or 1 here and 3 later. But you make the choice.
Two minutes. You need a new school paradigm. You need child-centered, teacher-directed, and parent-involved schools, and you need democratic education. This work needs to start in kindergarten. The district administrators should continue to discuss data and alignment, and you're not dealing with the crux of the problem. You can't get the kids to stop dropping out, and now you're moving along with a program where you hope they magically go on to college? I'm terribly sorry to tell you this, but in 1973, I worked with Professor John Gray in the Berkeley Writing Project. Writing skills have to start in kindergarten. Oh, by the way, they only teach cursive in 3rd grade, and it's been discovered that our American citizenry has terrible handwriting, and they don't get good grades because you can't read what they're writing. Anyway, your classrooms are not geared for learning, and without the skills and the love of learning, there will be no pursuit of higher education. The teachers are powerless to change the focus of their work, the teaching to the test. Your curriculum is not engaged, it is not relevant, and is not socially conscious. Your classrooms are not cooperative and supportive environments. The classrooms are chaotic, competitive, punitive, humiliating, damaging, and even dangerous. There is no accommodation of different learning styles. There's no embrace of diversity. In fact, there's outright animosity in the GATE classes and the academies against Latinos. The waste, fraud, and misappropriation is just the tip of the iceberg of our funding problems. The only money that is really being spent is on the educators and the administrators learning all this stuff, and you think it's all great.
15 seconds, Mrs.
The
Smith.
fact that this is new to you, the fact that you're just approaching this is so disconcerting and disgusting. The fact, for the first time, you're using the words disconnect, misalignment, entrance and exit competencies and
Thank you,
compliance.
Mrs.
You
Smith.
are clueless.
And any other comment on this one? All right. Thank you. We are moving on to item F5. I want to give staff and board members a heads up that I am likely to pull F6, report on sustainability initiatives, and bring that back to an October agenda. And we will talk about F5 and F7. So with this, F5, report on possible waiver of unused site fees for Hidden Valley and Tatum properties.
Well, we have another great idea from Eric Smith and Dave Hetyoung.
Actually, I got to give some credit to Craig Price. We've been mulling over how we could get out from underneath unused site fees for, I don't know, the last 18 months or so. And we were putting our heads together, and obviously in our effort to, turn over every stone and look for money or cost savings, he did a little follow-up with the Office of Public School Construction and talked to them about their waiver process, and I'm just kind of following up on some of his initial contacts. Under Ed Code Section 17219, it provides that that unused site fees can be reduced if a site is used for more than 1/2 of the year for a civic center, community playground, playing field, or other outdoor recreational purpose, and that's the critical term there. Right now, the Tatum site is available and used, whether it's officially or unofficially, for that kind of purpose. The other site, the Hidden Valley site, basically doesn't allow ingress or egress, and basically we don't have signage and things of that nature there. So the thought was, do we want to do something similar at Hidden Valley, similar to what we have at Tatum, and apply for the waiver? But before we went ahead and did that, we wanted to get the board's feedback on that and see if that was something you wanted us to move forward with. If that's the case, we would actually make some of those kind of improvements. Dave would probably have to go do some reconnaissance. I don't think he's been out there in a while, but we think with minimal expense we could do some of those things, and it doesn't hurt us to apply. It's administrative paperwork that needs to be filed. I think I attached it in here. I have had some experience with this program. I had to think back to Eureka in 93, 94 was the last time I dealt with it, but I think it's worth a shot if that's something the board would be willing to do. It's $125,000 we're paying on an annual basis, and it is adjusted for inflation each year, so it always goes up and never goes down unless you end up, building on it and using it as a school site or some of the other exempt uses.
So I guess my first question on this is, would it then be recognized in the spring budget cuts as a savings?
Well, if we could move ahead and get the green light, that they would basically, waive those fees, and presumably that would take effect in 10/11, and if that was the case, the answer would be yes.
Any other, Mrs. Cordero?
In your report, you briefly touched on the issue of liability if we were to do the upgrades on the Hidden Valley property in order to apply for the waiver. Can you just talk about that a little bit?
I think part of the due diligence we would do is talking to our insurance carrier, which is CISC. CISC 2 is property and liability, and see if they saw any concerns there. Obviously, we would actually investigate all those issues before we brought it back for action.
Mrs. Deacon?
Well, I would just say generally I'm very favorably disposed because I think the community is always looking for additional places for recreation. And I also was concerned about liability, but it occurs to me that our school fields are used constantly by their neighbors to throw frisbees for their, or to play on. So we're already looking at liability for our sites, so I don't know if we're necessarily going to incur more liability. So I'm very supportive.
I think the other thing too is you have one site that's effectively being used for this purpose. you have liability in one district,
Dr. Noel?
I'm thinking about the Tatum site. That's the paintball. I know it because my kids used to go paintball battles out there.
They might have played with my kids because they were there too.
Just as I read this, then the idea, what do you call it, Mr. Herron, what's a presumptive easement?
Oh.
Are we?
Open and notorious use of something for extended period of time, paying taxes
I
is part of that.
got the right word then, okay. Have we ever looked at that issue with respect to Tatum? As I see Tatum being used, and that's been a long time. And then I look at, well, should we open up Hidden Valley? It seems to me if you're opening it up, you could kind of create the terms of use. But Tatum's already been, there's a pattern of usage that goes back a long, long time. Is that a problem at all?
Although I believe with Tatum, we do have signage, and I don't know if it references any of our rules and regulations, but that is a discussion we had with Craig Price.
We do have some signage there, but per Craig Price, the easement issue applies to private property, not public property.
Okay.
So we would not be subject to that.
That's nice, thank you.
Any other comments? Sounds like most of us are quite interested in that.
Okay.
Mr. Herron?
At some point, we should at least get some community input of the neighbors before we just open up something to have people mob the area to take part in.
Yes, just to let you know that we do have some neighbors that watch over those properties, and when they see activities happening that shouldn't be happening, they do contact the district.
Thank you. All right, moving on to, we're going to pull item F6, the report on sustainability initiatives, and move on to F7, the report on status of Santa Barbara School District's truancy program.
Good. And Michael Gonzalez will initiate this report. Are you going to have Bud speak as well?
Correct.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much. Just by way of background, you may recall that back in October of 2008, the budget crisis facing the county of Santa Barbara forced them to withdraw funds from the truancy program. We charged Mr. Andrews, our administrator of safety, welfare, and attendance, to pull together a team of principals and teachers from K-12, elementary, junior high, and high schools to put together a truancy program that would address the needs of the district, address the needs of students, and be in compliance with the law. What we have this evening is a draft, a proposed plan for truants in the district, and I'd like to call Mr. Andrews up to the podium.
Good evening. Truancy, as you know, is an issue that's been very problematic, especially with the absence of probation, and the DA's truancy program. As a result of that, as you can tell from the memo that was written earlier, the county no longer provides the SARB, or the School Attendance Review Board. And as Mr. Gonzalez said, we attempted to put something together over this last year during 08-09. The biggest problem is that it's not only Santa Barbara, but Carpinteria and the county schools are suffering from the same problem. We don't have a program in place. In addition to meeting with admins and teachers from within the district, we also had several meetings, actually headed by Paul Cordero, the superintendent down in Carpinteria, trying to come up with some collaborative truancy program. We ran into the same problem as we did in-house. There's no money to support it. Where we really fall back to is a liability issue. As much as liability as we're talking about Hidden Valley, we're obligated to advise parents of their students who are truant. And what this draft proposal covers is exactly that. That first letter is crucial, and we want to continue a program, but in order to do that, we're going to need some support to do that. Certainly from a liability perspective, that's why I'm recommending that we offer a stipend to a certificated person to make sure that we meet those liability needs first. In addition, in fact, I have to discuss this with Mr. Guajardo. In the past, we haven't considered, at least to the best of my knowledge, we haven't considered a student's special ed status or 504 status before putting them into the truancy program. And I think it's prudent that we do manifestation determinations, IEPs, on those students before we progress with something that's tantamount to a punitive measure, even though the truancy program by design is supposed to be an intervention, not a consequence. I've studied a lot of numbers. I won't give them all to you only because they're extensive. Trying to figure out where we should concentrate our efforts on truancy. In-house and in this collaborative with Carpinteria and the county, we really felt very strongly that the focus should be on the older elementary kids. Before they design a pattern of their own of truancy without any consequence, we thought if we get them into the pattern of getting to school, then it will, in the future, prevent problems or prevent the extent of the truancy that we have now. That said, the rate of truancy last year, it is important to say the rate of truancy last year when we had no truancy program whatsoever was actually about half of what it was the previous year when we did have a truancy program. So that's inexplicable to me. I don't know if that's an aberration or if that's a function of leave me alone. I'll take care of it myself. I don't mean to be flippant with that, but I don't have an understanding for that. The pattern of truant students, those with 18 or more period truancies or 3 full days of truancy, actually went down in just about every school last year. The numbers of truancies that those kids have has actually gone down, but the number of kids who are truant to some degree has gone up. And so the numbers are all over the board. And I've discussed this with quite a few people, and we're all just giving each other that I don't know what's happening with it look either. But I think it's important that we at least have somebody in place to make sure that the schools are making those fundamental notifications that their student is absent to the parents. Okay. And then I'll open that up to questions.
Board members, you've taken a look through and some of the proposed language here and steps and truancy letters. Mrs. Cordero?
Well, first of all, thank you for this update because without the previous program, I wasn't quite sure what we had in place at this point. But I wanted to ask, As you identified the groups that you met with as part of this consortium, has there been any meetings or like public forums or public meetings to talk to parents or students about this? Because as you know, our previous truancy program was quite controversial among many members of the public. And a lot of parents routinely expressed concern about that process. So I'm wondering if the parents would likely have a lot of input into what they would have preferred. And I'm wondering if you were able to get any of that input.
We did not have a public forum, but we did discuss that in-house and getting that input from that important stakeholder group. But what we did decide as a group, again, in-house and as this collaborative with the others, is the most important step in the previous program when we did have the DA's involvement. They actually had 2 full-time people assigned, if anybody remembers, Debbie Nichols and Carrie Anderson. What was most effective was actually somebody knocking on the door, talking to the parents one-on-one in the home, saying, this is a problem, what can we do about it, what's happening? And that actually happened right before what we called the TMT, or the Truancy Mediation Team. And so when we had these meetings the last year, we didn't have any parent input at that point because we didn't want to present the sky at that point. We wanted to present a structured program that we thought would work and then get their input from that point. Absent any kind of financial support, we never got there.
Okay, then just one other kind of, I guess, semantic question, and that is, on the report where you list the steps 1, 2, numbers 1 and 2 say that letters will be sent to the students. Are they sent to the students or are they sent to the parents?
They're sent to the parents of John Doe.
Okay, okay,
I can correct that.
okay, thank you.
Mrs. Deacon?
I appreciate your efforts as well, because I think we all feel it's really important for the kids to be at school. I spent some of my time looking at the language of the letters, and I'd be happy to provide some input outside of this setting and not take a lot of time. But I was really struck in the first letter. If I was a parent and I got this, I'm not sure I would know what further action might be expected of the parent. And so, we might want to craft something so they know what they should do next or what they could do next.
By design, the first letter is only intended to be informative. There is no parent action required.
So
Is
we
that
need
the-
to tell them that.
Okay.
That would be, if I was a parent, the first thing I would do is talk to my student and then probably call the principal. But I think what's important here is to let them know that no, they don't need to do anything else, but we're encouraging them to do that. And in the second one, I think we might want to start out by saying you previously received notification that your student has been truant, so that there's some continuity there. And again, I don't need to do this now. I'd be happy to provide you with some ideas.
Part of these letters were derived from that collaborative Carpinteria County in-house meeting. And we were trying, if that's the direction we were going to end up going, we wanted to make sure that our letters were consistent from one district to the next. And so some of this you'll see really isn't a Santa Barbara product, but a product of several people.
Right. Okay,
Miss-
thank you.
Mr.
We would appreciate any comments like that, though. Thank you.
Mr. Herron?
I can email those to you as well, Ms. Deacon, if you'd like. Okay.
Yeah, my questions relate to the groups, the group meeting and after letter 2, the SARB after, I don't know, 3rd or 4. It seems like you could go from 3 days of absence to 4 days to absence to 6 days to absence before you could even have a meeting.
You're absolutely right.
How many of these meetings are going to be held? How often? And I mean, are you just?
Well, in the past, the after-school meeting, that meeting that followed letter 2, Sometimes those meetings were held when the student was technically eligible for letter 4 or 5, but we're not going to put a student in 3, 4, or 5 until they've gone to 2, and we've seen some sort of improvement, or if there is no improvement, then they'll move on.
But would you have these group meetings every week? I mean, every month?
They were done every other week.
Because it seems like every other week.
That was at the high school level. They were done roughly monthly at the junior highs, and they weren't done at all in the elementary schools.
It just seems like you're going to run through these letters really quick. And
Thousands of these letters are produced annually, literally thousands.
Dr. Noel.
Do you have any, it's sort of like a graduated program, right?
Yes, sir.
3 days, 4 days, or 6 days, 14 days.
And they are
When-
arbitrary.
At what point there does it bite?
Sir?
At what point does it get any traction? Does it produce results?
Well, you've hit the core of the entire problem. There are no teeth. We're looking for teeth in the program. I know Mr. Gonzalez last year very briefly discussed what we had hoped to work with the local district attorney on. There's a pilot program up in Lompoc where the parent was cited when a student was truant. That turned out to be another financial boondoggle, if you will. I don't mean to be flippant with that either. But roughly somewhere between $500 to $750 per student if we wanted to get them cited.
Oh, my goodness.
It costs the school.
It would cost us that. We would have to pay the DA for the attorney's time and the clerical time. More so if it were contested in court.
What does it mean in number 4 to refer to a subpoena? Are you talking about a real subpoena to?
A real subpoena,
to a
yes, sir.
To a superior court?
The subpoena is actually generated from the district office.
So we have subpoena power?
For that purpose, yes, sir. The SARB is actually subject to the Brown Act. There's agendas would have to be posted and public comments provided, and then we would close that when we dealt with individual student cases.
So you're saying this doesn't work?
I'm
Did I
saying
hear
there are
that
no
right?
teeth to it. That's right. Yes, sir.
Well, you
There's
haven't tried it yet.
But at this point, I'm really concerned about making sure that we cover our liability in terms of advising the parent. We need more teeth. And that has been the $64,000 question when we have all these other organizations trying to come up with an answer. At this point, we have no teeth in the program.
But we do have an obligation to notify parents.
We have an obligation to
So-
notify, yes, sir.
So basically, a lot of this is just covering one's bureaucratic derriere.
There's a-
Dr. Noel, reaching for the acceptable word there, thank you.
I'm searching.
Well, there was, at one time, some at least appearance of teeth when probation was involved, either a 601B informal or formal probation referrals. And since probation is no longer in the program, that's no longer an option. The citations are no longer an option. At this point, as a school administrator, we're pretty much down to go to school. And if they don't, then the next answer is go to school.
So, Mr. Andrews, I want to be clear. So for the past year, have any letters been going out?
Yes, ma'am.
So the basic letters have been going out,
Yes,
just the true, sort of the level one.
The program itself, exactly. We're stuck at letter 1 right now.
You're
There's-
stuck at letter 1. In the meantime, parents do get a call out when their child, from the
Absolutely.
automated phone systems, if
They
their
do.
child misses a class. What, does that happen after one class or at
Right,
the end of the day?
Ordinarily, that's a daily communication.
Okay.
It's all done using, it's not School Messenger now. I think they're
Teleparent.
using Teleparent with that now. There's where the parents get a message. In fact, Teleparent is even advising parents of tardies in addition to absences. So-
Okay, good. But with it just being the letter, I just want to be really clear on this, and the call-out system, over the past year, more students have been truant, but fewer students are repeat truant. Is that correct? Is that what you were saying?
Those students, let me say this correctly, those students who by law meet the requirement to be habitually truant, and that's only 3 days of truancy, the number of those students has actually gone down. But the number of students who experience some level of truancy, whether it's 1 or 2 periods or 1 or 2 days, has actually gone up.
Okay.
And plus, there's a distinct difference in the number of truancies between Latino students and white students. And that was part of our focus on where do we want to put our efforts.
Okay. Mrs. Cordero?
Well, that actually brings up the issue that I was going to comment on, and that is that I always find it sort of a challenge to identify how to address this in the best way, because if students are truant, especially if they're meeting certain levels of truancy that put them at risk or that identify them to us as students where we need to intervene, it suggests that there's something about school that they don't find appealing, that they don't want to be there. Punishing them doesn't make it more appealing.
Right. That's why I identified this as an intervention. It's not intended to be consequential.
Right, but I think they will see it as...
Absolutely, they will.
...as consequential. So I'm wondering if there's anything that we could be doing with these students who have been identified as potentially at-risk students for truancy to connect them more with the school, to make them, to provide them with some kind of positive experience that makes them more inclined to want to be at school. And I realize that that's a big challenge. But sending letters to the parents, I mean, some parents will be able to have that impact or that effect on their students. But for the most part, I think it will be seen by the students as punitive, which may or may not get them to actually come, but certainly won't necessarily make them feel better about it, which in the long run is what we want if we're going to avoid the potential down the road for further truancies.
Oh, absolutely. I've had individual discussions with probably all the secondary administrators individually, APs and principals, about something along those lines. What can we do to make school attractive to the kids who, other than truancy, they're not problematic. They're just not showing up, which tells me they're just not engaged. So.
Has this gone to a principals meeting yet?
No, ma'am.
Okay, I'll be curious to hear what the group discussion, how that goes. This will be interesting.
Right.
Mrs.
And
Deacon?
just following up on what Mrs. Cordero was talking about, I would think if they went to this second meeting level, that the teacher or the principal, whoever they're meeting with, could kind of draw out something that the student likes about school and try to reconnect them, or maybe find a teacher that they like who could be the liaison. And
Actually, that's probably more appropriate for this proposed third letter. There's the second letter activates, to use the term, the after-school meeting. The third is where the student actually meets with an administrator behind a closed door with a parent and find out, are the parents going through a divorce? Are there money issues? Are there other things going on where privacy is respected? So.
I would just like to say that as a former truant, there's a lot more than whether or not the school is attractive that enters the decision whether you're going to go to class. A lot more. And I think that I think we need certainly to do a comprehensive examination of what it would take to make our schools and our high schools programs more attractive. As you know, I tend to think that a high-quality career technical education programs might do that for many students, but some students nothing may reach. And my record was really good compared to my big brothers. Thanks.
Mr.
Yes,
Herron.
And you're proposing that this whole program be done by one SARB secretary who's going to handle all these letters, all these group meetings?
No, the first letter is actually generated by the school. They go out at the school, when they're put in, they're not there yet, but they can actually be activated through ARIES. And this one person would be making sure that the schools send out those letters. There's a not personally sending out those letters herself or himself. So.
And then arranging for all these group meetings.
Again, making sure that they're done, not doing them by themselves.
Who would organize them, present the material?
That's a site-based responsibility. Ordinarily, the assistant principals would do those. When I was an assistant principal at the high school, I would do both the English and Spanish after-school meetings. And then they would meet individually with their assistant principals for the letter 3. And then the DA's office, they would be part of the after-school meeting, and they would actually run the truancy mediation, the step 4, and the SARB would handle it.
So somebody
the
at
county
each
office.
site's going to handle all these group meetings, all these meetings with a site administrator, all these letters.
Right, there's ordinarily an assistant principal who's designated for attendance purposes.
So they've already been doing that. Yeah. All right, well, thank you. I believe we have public comment on this.
Mrs. Smith, 2 minutes.
President Parker, members of the school board. It's 10:30. I have been the only member of the public for an hour. My son was placed in the truancy program. And because I came home from the truancy meeting and did what I was told to do, which was to demand that he go to school, even though he had an undiagnosed learning disability, I am now demanding that you accommodate my ADA, post-traumatic stress disorder, and allow me to speak for 3 minutes and give me a little more time. Or I will file a lawsuit against this district. May I have 3 minutes and then some? My comments are written out. I will speak as well as I can.
I just would like a little clarification from Mr. Herron on this, because I thought it was 2 minutes for the last one and 3 minutes for this one.
3323, or 3322.
Oh, okay.
But I think if she wants 3 minutes, we should give her 3 minutes.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Bud Andrews was just heard saying, "We're clueless." Bud Andrews admitted you are not compliant with the special education laws. Newsflash, you are obligated to teach the students, as well as to let the parents know that your student is having problems. And newsflash, Annette Cordero, the message from the parents, advocates, and lawyers is not that the truancy program is controversial. It is that the truancy program and parent accountability program is illegal, unethical, uncivil, and immoral. Please go to SB School Talk and read about the school to prison pipeline, which was started here by Bill Cerrone and the DA. ACLU describes it as a disturbing practice of pushing out low-performing students into the juvenile justice system, criminalizing the children instead of educating them. The low socioeconomic sector of our society are the victims. Children of color. It is insidious racism and child abuse. My son, when I said, "Go find him," the night I came home and yelled at him, he ran away from home. He was 16 years old, and he has not slept in his bed since. We filed a due process because he had a learning disability. The test scores go up, the county-run jail schools receive twice the ADA, and the probation, police, and district attorney increase their budgets by millions of dollars a year because of the school to prison pipeline. But the damage that is done to our society is enormous. Here's what I propose. Submit this document, which is exactly the same as the county's truant truancy program and parent accountability
Another 30 seconds. Mrs. Smith.
program. Submit it to experts who know that IDEA and ADA Section 504 mandate schools to seek, test, diagnose, and treat the learning disabled and the mentally ill and the emotionally challenged.
Thank you.
They
Mrs.
can't find any focus on educating and nurturing our children in this document. All they see is a desperate plan to keep the school-to-prison pipeline thriving.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. Okay, we are now on to item G, to return to consent items designated discussion. We did have a number of those that were pulled. Starting off with item D2, that was Mrs. Deacon, I believe.
It was, let me find the page I'm looking for. Oh, so I guess it's not a surprise. I wanted to just briefly touch on the selling of the parking permits. Well, a couple of reasons. I know we've put on hold the thought of trying to generate any revenue for the district to do this, and frankly, if we're getting money for it, if it goes to the schools, that's basically okay with me too. However, there had been a concern that by charging for parking, we were maybe the wrong word, pushing students into the neighborhood to park, but it sounds to me like if that was a problem, we would have already heard about it, or I guess I just wanted to raise that because that's something that had been raised as a possible problem, but if in fact we're already charging for parking, is that really a problem?
It's our understanding that this would memorialize what's already happening. And the board would actually authorize it because I don't believe it was ever previously authorized. And we have 2 out of the 3 comprehensive high schools that do charge for student parking, which I think was unbeknownst to us when we talked about it during the budget cuts last year. So I think by way of this item, I mean, we would ask for relief on bringing an item back unless you're telling us you want us to pursue that on above and beyond what the ASBs are charging.
Well, I don't personally. The one thing that came to mind, though, was in the future, I know we may have a joint meeting with the city of Goleta, and if it really is a problem for those surrounding neighborhoods, I know at City College they have residential parking permits in those areas, and that would actually be a source of revenue for the city of Goleta if they find people who didn't have a residential parking permit.
And just to be clear, I think the issue with overflow into the adjacent neighborhoods was really relevant to events parking, not so much the student parking issue.
I would have to say, though, that I'm troubled by it. I'm happy to memorialize it tonight, but it would be tantamount to, an after-school club deciding that they were going to rent out a room, that they were going to charge a fee for some facilities use, which we have a whole facilities use permitting process for. And so I think that at some point in the near future, we really need to talk about this as a board and maybe get something in place for next year in terms of whether or not this is appropriate, and if it's appropriate, what process is used.
I agree. I think it needs to be formalized one way or the other. I'm not averse to approving it now because I don't want to hurt the ASBs this year, but I think we do need to come back to this.
Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve D2.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
It passes unanimously. Next up was D13. Dr. Noel.
I actually had no quarrel. I want to comment simply that it looks like a good buy, what we're getting from Liebert Cassidy for the money. And I, of course, worry when we go beyond the basic service because the rate goes up, but it really doesn't. But $245 to $275 an hour for senior partners in a law firm is, I think we get a pretty good deal, I think. That's all. I just wanted to comment on that.
Would you like to make a motion?
I make a motion to approve that item.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
It passes
Aye.
unanimously. On to D14, approval of purchase order report for the period September 2nd, 2009 through September 15th, 2009. And I think this is also you, Dr. Noel?
I again, I don't, forgive me, but I don't know what sale for education is. And since it's costing us a pot full of money, $46,000,
That,
maybe I would love to know a little more about what it is.
that is our standards-aligned instructional leadership. It's the professional development. We're in our second year with all of the administrators in our district. There's a few assistant principals that don't attend.
Well, that's enough. You said two things, so it's not just for you.
Oh, me? No, no, no,
Well, you're the
no.
one listed there, and I thought, man, we're spending an awful lot of money.
I have to
Sending you
sign
sailing.
that. Oh, no, 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 no. We're, every single one of our principals and district office
Okay,
staff with
okay.
instruction.
I move to approve this.
Second.
All right, that second will go to Mr. Herron. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That passes unanimously. And then there's D16, which was Mr. Herron. This is approval of contract award to the low responsible bidder for portable classroom relocation at Washington Elementary School. We did get a handout about this.
Yeah, that's one of the
early in
reasons
the
I asked to be pulled, just to verify that we did get a addendum that actually lists who was chosen. And I thought that was important. But if you have just 1 minute to tell us what the schedule is now for Washington and their improvements. In 1 minute, maybe a minute and a half?
Hopefully, within a few weeks, the contractor will mobilize and be on site and start the grading process. The contract does call for quiet times during testing, so we would hope that that contractor can prepare most of that site during this school year. There is some work to be done in the library and a couple of adjoining classrooms that can't be done during school. And then as soon as school is out, the contractor would start to relocate the portables to their new location. There is a date in the contract for the portables that are within 12 feet of the property line to be moved first. That's all spelled out, but I can give you a board brief on specific dates and timelines if you have certain things in mind. But basically, the classrooms will be moved at the beginning of summer. The prep work will be done during the school year.
Okay, we will communicate with the neighbors that once we approve this and you get the contract signed, the neighbors will be noticed as to what's happening?
Typically, we do that through the principal.
In fact, if I recall correctly, I think it was June 8th that was the portable removal date from the neighbors.
If you could give us a board brief, I'd appreciate it.
You bet.
All right, excellent.
I will move for approval.
Is there a second? Was that Dr. Noel seconding? All those in favor? Aye. That passes unanimously. And with that, we are moving on to item H, coming events. I don't know if board members have anything that they want to announce out there. Moving on to item I, board comments and correspondence. Mr. Herron.
A couple of things. Newshawk did a great job on Tom. Hope you saw that. You know, Calvary's coming, so we appreciate that. That was very nice. The first comment on it was they hope you last more than a week, and you've already done that, so you're doing good.
Your SMART goals are going great.
Yes. I did go to the Day of Caring that United Way put on, and there were like 1,300 volunteers at this Page Center, and the Santa Barbara Don's Net Cafe, 2 of their members created a song about clean beaches and actually sang it to the group. The Dos Pueblos Marching Drum Corps did the coming in and going out ceremony, and the San Marcos Madrigal Singers sang the national anthem. It was all extremely well done. I went out to Dos Pueblos. I was assigned as a team of 1 to go to Dos Pueblos, and there were 120-some volunteers there just completely revamping the whole, you know, big trees, big bushes, landscaping. I was assigned to litter pickup, light to moderate duties. She took 1 look at me and handed me my badge that said litter pickup. So the parking lot out there is very clean, and I take credit for it. But it was amazing to see the young people. It was absolutely amazing. And then finally, I did listen to Kate Parker on the radio being interviewed by Lanny. And lucky it was Lanny and not, well, Lucky it was Lanny. He had his own agenda, but Kate did very well. I did go down and pick up a copy of the, and I'm going to give it to Kate.
Oh,
If
thank
wants-
you.
If she wants to share with anybody else, she can.
Maybe we should play it right now.
That's
It's only
okay.
an hour.
We're early, yeah.
That was kind of you. Future agenda.
She was very good, by the way.
I had a comment.
Yes, comment.
Yes. I was terribly pleased and impressed that La Cumbre broke 800 with its API. They've come a long way, and I think it's a dedicated faculty and great leadership, and congratulations to La Cumbre.
And we actually had that school probably has made the biggest leap over the past few years. We did have another school break 800, which was Santa Barbara Community Academy. I noticed that they're both at 2255 Modoc Road, which is probably, just kismet, but
But 800 is harder for a middle school than
it
for an
is.
elementary school.
It absolutely is. And,
Very, very
and the
tough
Community
competition.
Academy did not have as far to go. So I really, kudos to the Cumbre.
Although I have to say, there are a couple of middle schools in this state that are predominantly Latino and disadvantaged that are breaking 900.
All right, there's a target.
So we take pride and joy, but there's a long way to go as usual.
Future agenda items? Yes, Mrs. Deacon.
I'll try to make this really quick. I was thinking about our board self-evaluation work session and how we talked about the need to be proactive and get out ahead of things. And it may seem early, but I think that we could capitalize on what we've learned most recently in terms of determining the numbers of teachers that we need to lay off and rehire, and thinking about the timing of that rehiring. I mean, for me, it's always been a priority to have more tenure-track teachers, less temporary teachers, and so I'd like us to start looking at that sooner rather than later, and also this notion of being able to decide those that we can hire back sooner when we can, so that we can compete with other districts that sometimes hire back sooner than we do.
Okay.
So a future item. Thank you.
Okay. Just a reminder that we have a board meeting next Tuesday. It is a regular board meeting. It's largely going to be on the 4,000 and 5,000 series. However, there will be a closed session and a few other items on the agenda.
I have two other items for
Mhm.
future board items. We've been in contact with Goleta for possible joint city council board meeting, and they've given me some dates: Thursday afternoon, November 19, Friday afternoon, November 20, and a third choice, November 5th, which is a Thursday afternoon. And they would prefer the 19th or 20th.
November.
November. Shall I email these to the board?
Yeah, we can
Okay.
use some feedback.
I will do that. And secondly, we had talked about the Education Foundation's benefit concert, the Michael McDonald concert, which conflicts with our December 8 board meeting. We would have to schedule that meeting legally between December 4th and December 18th, and we had talked about the possibility of going to December 15, which is the following Tuesday. Have board members been able to check your calendars on that?
Yeah, it's
I-
fine. for-
If that's the case. If that's the case, I will work with the appropriate wording, put it on for action so that we can appropriately act on it then. Thank
All
you.
right. Mrs. Deacon.
In light of the Goleta meeting, would it be possible to hold it at one of our Goleta school sites?
Oh, I've already invited them
Okay.
to come to one of our
Okay.
Goleta sites, yes.
Okay, great.
All right, with no objection from the board, I will now adjourn this meeting. However, please don't go. If you have not signed the document in there that needs signing, I need you to step in to sign those resolutions.